Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Alien vs. Predator Galaxy podcast. This is episode 112, and I'm regular host Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks, and joining me are usual partners in crime.
I'm Adam Zeller. Hello, everyone.
Also known as
RidgeTop on the forums.
And who else is there?
Eric Adams, otherwise known as Xenomorphine.
And joining us is a special guest. He is here as our, I suppose, Marvel expert for this one.
Yeah.
Please welcome Paul to the show.
Hello. Yes, thank you for having me. I basically, for those of you who are wondering how I got on the show, it's because I invited myself and they were graciously very nice enough to oblige me. So, yes, I'm a longtime Marvel comic reader. And if you're wondering why a Marvel comic reader needs to be on the show, then we got some news for you.
Some news.
Yeah, we got some news for you. Yeah, so no, thanks for having me on the show, guys. It's an honor. I love the show. So yeah, this is awesome.
Good to have you here.
All right.
Like I said, it was good timing with you showing up and being like, oh, I love the show, and then the Marvel news dropped later on. I'd love to come on the show.
Hey, just if I find a chance, it is really weird, which we can get into in a second. But yeah, it's how it all worked out is really crazy. But this is exciting news all around, I think.
Yeah, so we are going to be talking about the Marvel news. But before we do, though, as we do when we have a new guest on the show, I just want to pass it over to Paul just to tell us a little bit about his background with the Alien and Predator series. So over to you, Paul.
All right. Well, as I've warned the guys before, I tend to go on long, so I'll try to keep it short and concise. I loved the Predator more so Alien as a younger person. I discovered Alien later on in my early 20s. I had watched Alien Resurrection in high school, and that was probably my first full Alien movie, which, as you can imagine,
good intro.
Right, that one was it was a little weird. I liked it more as a high school someone in high school, and then rewatching it literally the first time in 20 years, whatever it's been, like a month ago, and that was quite an experience. Which, by the way, I'd rather watch AVP2 Requiem or whatever. Sorry, I always call it AVP2, but AVP Requiem over Resurrection any day of the week. So that's for you, Adam. So
Resurrection actually grew on me, and I know it has for a number of fans too. I did not like it when I first saw it.
Yeah, maybe I'll watch it again and give it a chance. That was rough. But anyway, but Predator was the one I probably knew the best because I'd watched an edited movie version of that on cable or on regular television like a bunch of times and love Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then my brother, he ended up buying the original graphic novel of Batman versus Predator. And I had read that thing over and over and over again, and I freaking love that comic. That comic is great. So weird that it's written by the guy who drew Watchmen and then drawn by the legendary Andy Kubert. The art is phenomenal. I just, it's weird to look at the original. I had the original one, and it's weird to look at because it's so dark. The pages are so dark. It's like, man, this is like hard to almost to look at it sometimes, but it's so good. I grew up on that, so I grew up loving Predator a little more than Alien at the time, and then watching Alien Predator 2, and it just being like, oh, this is cool. And I always see the AVP comics, kind of as I got older, and so basically I would kind of see peripherally going, okay, whatever. And AVP came out. I couldn't wait to see that movie because I had just watched Alien and Aliens, and I fell in love with those franchises because of AVP coming out. It's all coming back to me. It's been a while. And I remember I was at a friend's house. We were just in a road trip, and AVP was about to come out. And he's a huge Aliens fan. And he basically was like, yeah, you should watch Alien Aliens. I'm like, cool. And I fell in love with them. They became two of my favorite movies ever. I love those two movies to death. And he actually told me, Alien 3, though, I don't know if you're going to like that. Because I love the Marines, right? And so, they kill off Newt and Hicks. I'm like, what? And because I'd seen bits and pieces of Alien 3, and then here or there as whatever on TV, and it just never, it's kind of whatever. And then finally, when I got into Aliens, later on, he told me that happened. I'm like, I don't need to watch it. So I didn't watch it for years until literally I didn't watch. Again, I'd see it here or there even afterwards, just kind of bits and pieces. Finally watched it completely from beginning to end, assembly cut. And last month, like when my rewatch of binges, finally watched the whole thing, and then was like, "Whoa, I really like that. That was way better than I was expecting." And then I told the guys before the show, I listened to your guys' podcast with the guy who assembled the assembly cut, and that was really cool to listen to. So yeah, my main thing with this is kind of started with Predator. AVP kind of brought me back in. And then kind of, here or there, I saw AVP Requiem with my wife around Christmas. That was fun. We both had a hoot watching that in the theater. So yeah, I mean, in fact, I think, Eric, this is why I brought up the Alien Covenant show a couple that you guys did for a couple of years ago. Someone said, I think one of you guys said that, I think it was you, Eric, that this is not someone you bring a date to. I was like, oh, that's weird, because my wife and I went on the see Covenant together as one of those dinner date, dinner theater places. We went to see Covenant in that, and it was so. I remember my wife got a little tipsy and we were watching it. And we were just like laughing and had a good time. And
That's the best way
Covenant
to watch it.
Yeah, I mean it's okay.
Covenant's not tipsy worthy.
It's okay.
I think it would get better with alcohol.
Well, whatever. I like Covenant fine. Prometheus, whatever. But yeah. So I've watched all the films, and I always meant to get into the comics more, but just never got into them. But just really quickly to kind of wrap it all up, I was telling Aaron the other day I was just kind of found out about the new Predator game, Hunting Grounds. I had no idea it was even coming out, and I remember it was Aaron's live streams of the game that kind of got me to buy the game. So I want to make sure if the people are listening, this show is responsible for me purchasing the game straight up. Like I had no idea, and I had read reviews. And I was like, I don't know. And then just watching Aaron and knowing a hardcore Predator fan, going playing the game and enjoying it was like, okay. And then seeing him play and go through, I'm like, I like this game. So I purchased it, and through all of that, I started going through all the movies again. I bought a bunch of them in 4K and just like a Prometheus and stuff, and I bought a bunch of comics. It just it was a lot. It just got going back into the fandom. So I've always been a fan. I've always wanted to get deeper into the fandoms, but I just never had a chance to, and kind of have a chance now. And then, ironically enough, this Marvel announcement happens, which I happen to be a giant Marvel fan. So it's really, really crazy. But yeah, I love these characters and these settings and Predator and whatnot. So yeah, I'm really excited to dive even deeper into all this stuff.
Well, it should be an interesting one, because I feel like there's a lot of stuff to come from this announcement. And it's funny because it's a lot of emotions as well. I mean, me and Adam were talking yesterday or the day before on Messenger about the whole thing, and I sent him a gif of the scene from Anchorman when Ron Burgundy's trapped inside the phone booth. I'm in a glass cage of emotion, and that's kind of how I feel about this one, because if you seriously don't know what's happened, Marvel, it's been announced that Marvel's got the licenses to do Alien, Predator, and Alien versus Predator comics. And I guess we all kind of expected this when
I don't know if we well, initially we did. We expected it, but for the fact that they had kind of left Dark Horse to do their thing for a couple of years, we were like, oh, well, maybe Alien and Predator are not important enough of a property for them to want to directly handle. So maybe they'll just let it go. But this is the first, again, like I was telling you guys, this is the biggest news we've had in the franchises since the films. It's a massive shift for the expanded universe, because Dark Horse for more than 30 years has done these comics, and not all of them have been fantastic. Some of them have been absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, this is going to be a big change, and it'll be interesting to discuss it.
I think the thing to remember here as well is that we don't necessarily know the technicalities of all the the legalities of these things. So I think it's normally a case of as I understand it, they would have had to have waited for the license to be up for renewal. So that would have probably been why nothing happened, immediately after the purchase. But I think I personally sort of always expected it just because of how they handled Star Wars anyway. Which is unfair. I feel like it's unfair as fuck for Dark Horse because that's two gut punches.
You could tell in their announcement they were a little salty about it. I mean, they were being as diplomatic as possible, but I think they're not happy campers about it. Eric, you look like you were dying to say something. What's on your mind?
No, go on.
Oh, you had your hands up there. So.
Oh man.
But the thing as well is that Alien. The original Alien series is arguably the reason why these tie-ins are taken seriously nowadays, or at least more seriously than they were. So not only did that catapult Dark Horse into a great deal of success, it changed how creators and publishers viewed tie-ins. So, it's a big piece of Alien comic tie-in history to be yanked away from Dark Horse.
Yeah, I mean, look at that shelf behind you.
I know.
That's like a full one, like 2 shelves. Well, maybe 1.5.
Oh God, it's even more. That's just the
collection,
the omnibuses. Yeah, that's just
and the hardcovers.
Wow.
That's the recent singles recent trades to have come out. The crossovers with DC. The essentials that they've just started republishing, which I guess they won't be finishing now.
That sucks. I was so I even threw that in the video, Aaron. If you noticed that little bit I did of the AVP Essentials Volume 2, where I said I hope they can finish anything that they've started, and then I show Essentials Volume 2 because, man, that would suck if they weren't able to release Essentials 2 for Alien, Predator, and AVP.
That's the kicker at the minute, isn't it? Because they haven't said if they're going to be finishing off what they've started. Now, again, my understanding is that they've got the license until the end of the year, literally the 31st of December. So they should be able to put out whatever until then. So obviously it's made a bit more complicated with the COVID situation, shutting down the comic printers until I think they've only just started back up. Is that right, Paul? I mean, at least in terms of Marvel.
Yeah, they're starting to come out now, but everything got pushed back. And like I was telling you guys before, that they even Marvel and DC both, and I'm not sure about Image, but and Dark Horse, but they started doing digital only for some of these comics they announced as digital and print. So they released everything digitally, but then they also have these print comics. But then they decided to discontinue some of these print comics, but then keep them going as digital only.
To that.
Yeah, I've heard. I'm not as cued into the comic scene as you are, Paul, but I've heard there's been some drama with the whole Diamond releasing and stuff like that.
That's DC. So Diamond Distributor is like this. Basically, it's a monopoly. And I know maybe that's a controversial thing for me to say, but my comic store guy I'd gone to for years had always hated the fact that Diamond was the only thing he could order from, basically, for all his books. Diamond distributed all the physical comics for everybody. And finally DC said, nope, we're done. We're doing it all ourselves, because you cut out the middleman. There's a lot more you can do. And I'm very curious what it's going to mean for pricing for physical comics later on. Will that even mean less physical media for DC in the future? I don't know. I mean, it's a game changer. And I've seen people in the business, again, I'll bring up Rob Liefeld. He's a very polarizing character, and understand that now everyone loves Rob. I kind of in the middle. I both like him, and I don't agree with everything he says. And I don't think he's a terrible artist. And he can't draw feet. I agree. But anyway, he said they'll be back. He said DC will be back. He lives for this industry, and he knows it. Again, not everyone agrees with him, but as soon as it happened, he said they'll be back. DC will be back with Diamond. So right now the industry is in a really, really weird place. And I think that with COVID shutting down all these comic book stores, there's a lot that is riding on what's going to happen to our specialty stores, because the digital only is where obviously everything media wise is going.
Yeah.
And
it's the same thing with the movie theaters now too. It's
right,
just
with
a lot of tension with these different industries.
Yeah. And so I think that you're seeing I think maybe some of the unfairness and some of the things that people were putting up with before, they're starting to go away now with all these industries, right? Like look at the movie theaters. They're saying, we want this, we want that. Universal's like, no, we're gonna do same day, digital for, and movie theaters are like, no, you're not. And so you have them fighting. There's so much going on, and COVID has been a game changer for a lot of different reasons. But the comic industry is interesting. I mean, there's a Diamond definitely, in my opinion, knowing the industry, and I'm not saying I'm a super expert of like knowing the ins and outs of how much everything is and all that jazz, but they are the only middleman basically that they can go to. There's nothing that these comic book stores can order from other than Diamond. They're the distributors. And so if they're the only company, then it's not a monopoly if it's just by proxy, right? So what do you do? And I think that now that DC did this could open the door for different things. What that could be bad, that could be good. I have no idea right now. And that's why I even said, it kind of came to my head, like that could mean less physical media for DC Comics. Maybe not. I don't know. It's possible, because maybe DC doesn't want to spend the money to distribute all these comics, because not many people are going to them, and these comic stores are starting to close now, and that's who are pretty much buying these physical comics, these single issues anyway. The trades are different. The trades are they definitely still sell physical. It seems like, what I understand, the physical trades sell better than the single issues, but the single issues are what drive these comic book stores, and they're keeping them, or whatever. But even those are starting to kind of dwindle down, as you see now. Marvel is now like, oh, okay, because they shut down these printing presses, we got to release these digitally. So because we want to get material out there for people to buy, we got to keep comics, going. So it's really fascinating right now what they're doing. And I think that, as we all know, nothing's going to be the same now after COVID. Everything is going to be changed, and how much physical media will be these companies will be putting out, we don't know. And what that could be. I mean, I know there was a big crossover event for Marvel called Empire. And I wasn't going to read it, but it was this big galactic, cosmic event, and they're canceling these tie-in issues because of COVID. They're like, just canceling it. Like, nope, just chopping it off, because there's so much out there. They don't want to oversaturate their own market, I'm assuming. And also they don't want to have to put out this stuff and not sell. So I think there's a lot, they're chewing away from the fat, if you will, right now, and just protecting their assets they're putting out now in every way they can. So it's a weird time for everything, especially the comic book industry. And now that things are starting to finally reopen, it hopefully will get better. But yeah, the Diamond is no longer, as of right now, DC is no longer working with them. But that could change. I wouldn't be surprised if it changed either. So we'll see.
I kind of want to circle back real quick, because Aaron, I feel like out of all of us, you've probably dived into the Dark Horse comics more than any of us. So, I mean, where are you at in this glass cage of emotion? Like, how are you feeling about all this?
The loyalist side of me is disappointed. Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they have been our source of one of our constant source of expanded universe adventures for 30 fucking years.
Yeah.
It's like I said earlier, not just the Alien, but in tie-in in general, they had such a huge impact on. And yes, some of it's been shit, Herc Mondo, Lovesick, Deadliest of Species, Vomit.
Rescue.
And that was fucking what was his name? Guy who did Days of Future Past for X-Men, Chris Claremont.
Chris Claremont? Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was
Deadliest
fucking,
of the Species?
Yeah.
Oh, that's one of the ones I have still never read. Because I heard so much bad things about it that I just never got around to reading it.
I'm going to throw it at you through the screen.
Yeah, Chris Claremont wrote it.
Wow.
And it's dog shit. But
tell us how you really feel.
Yeah.
Dark Horse, 2 thumbs up.
And yes, Rescue was awful recently as well. But I mean, they've also done some cracking stuff. I mean, I know you don't like it, Eric, but you're in the minority here. But Labyrinth, Destroying Angels, AVP,
Nightmare
the original
Asylum.
series, Nightmare Asylum. The recently, the last 6 years or so has been generally really good as well. Dead Orbit, Dust to Dust, the first half of Defiance. The Predator Hunter series has been fucking phenomenal as well. So, the last 6 years have been like a second golden age. I mean, we missed out on that period of from Aliens coming out to sort of Resurrection coming out, where it was just Alien and Predator all the time. It was a golden age. And then it died down for a little bit, and then we came back over the last 6 years, and it's been great. It's been great to experience that, to be able to go to the shops and pick up singles instead of hunting for trades and singles in boxes and stuff. I've been getting it in my pull list, so
That's cool.
I'm genuinely disappointed for Dark Horse and for the fact that they've been entertaining me so well greatly, and Marvel's an unknown quantity in this situation, so. It's that uncertainty that gives me a bit of pause in terms of the news. I mean, you've seen a lot of the reactionary stuff of this announcement of people being like, oh, it's going to be kiddified, there's going to be no blood, it's going to be nothing but crossovers and all that kind of stuff, which is probably completely off the fucking mark. And I'm sure we'll talk about this. There's plenty of examples of Marvel being fucking brutal.
Yes. That's true.
So, I'm sure that we'll talk about that in a bit as well. But I'm off and off. I'm sad Dark Horse is going, but on the other side, Marvel's a fucking powerhouse.
Yeah.
I mean,
I did not realize how big they were. I actually looked it up because I figured Marvel and DC were like neck and neck, but no. DC's a distant second. And Dark Horse is further down
there.
And that's what I was telling Aaron. I was like, it's super bittersweet because I feel like we're losing, or Dark Horse is losing this and we're losing it too, right as it's peaking. Like you said, we're in the middle of this second golden age and now it's going away. We got this year. Hopefully they can finish up everything. At the same time, I have to realize that this is really interesting stuff because Marvel is just such a big company. I mean, you just go to Twitter. Like Dark Horse is about 500,000 followers and Marvel's like almost 10 million. So regardless of how the stories end up, I hope they're great. They're going to get into the hands of a lot more readers just because it's Marvel. That's just a simple fact. So it is interesting in that regard because this is the first hands-on move that Marvel's parent company Disney has really made regarding the franchises, which shows us that they consider them to be valuable. Yes. So that's a really interesting thing, and it makes us wonder what else this means for the expanded universe, as well as any films that could potentially come in the future. I think that's a long ways off. I think Disney, with their acquisition of Fox, is these are some unique properties in that they're popular science fiction, but at the same time they are typically adult and typically violent in their tones. So how do they navigate this? But yeah, I know Dark Horse loved this property. I know they're probably pissed about this, just like they were Star Wars. But they still have some big stuff, especially in the video game world. I think they need to do more with Halo. They just got Cyberpunk, which is probably going to be one of the biggest games this year, if not this generation. So I feel like they could get some real use out of that. I think I don't know. I need to look up Dark Horse and where exactly they are in terms of market share with comic companies.
Oh, it's very low down. So,
yeah, I would say Image is probably more than them.
Oh yeah,
it's Image is number 3, I would say, and then I'm curious. I'd be very curious where they're at compared to like Boom.
They're not in the top 5. So it's
five?
Marvel, DC, Image, and then IDW.
IDW.
Let's see.
Yeesh.
I did a tracking thing for I've been meaning to do it for a long time, but I got bored. Working from home.
Dark Horse in 2019 was number 5. Yeah, okay. So, and they only had a dollar market share of 3.19% and a unit share of 2.33%. So they are fucking tiny compared to Marvel Comics at a 44.72% unit share. So yeah, I mean, we have to recognize that fact. This is going to elevate the profile of these properties. It just is. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, let me just bring up this fucking little spreadsheet that I was doing.
Got little spreadsheets.
Oh, actually, I would if it had saved. Oh, for fuck's sake! I spent ages doing this when I was bored one day. I'd been trying to track like the sales of the comics over the last 6-7 years, whatever, and individually they tended to go for about 6,000 units per issue per single. That's not a lot. Especially compared to some of the
online sales.
No, that's just through Diamond distribution.
Sometimes, yeah.
And by the way, I'm not bringing this up to slight Dark Horse. I have Dark Horse T-shirts. Like, I've been a loyal fan of the company. I've always been more into science fiction than I have superhero stuff. But I mean, when I was younger, I was really into Spider-Man and X-Men, and so I've always kind of dabbled in it, I guess. Like, I've just started playing the Spider-Man video game, and I think that's really cool. So I've always been, I've never been a superhero fan, but I've always been like interested in it, and I've enjoyed a lot of the media from it. And I think this is going to be another thing like Star Wars, right? Like Marvel is doing Star Wars comics. Star Wars is its own universe that has nothing to do with the Marvel superhero side of things. At the same time, with the teaser images we got from what was the artist again? Who did
David Finch.
David Finch, that's right.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Both of them.
Definitely.
This was brought to my attention with the Alien piece, but it seems like it's teasing Guardians of the Galaxy with the Walkman on the seat in the spaceship. And the Predator one is a little more obviously teasing, like he's on top of a Avengers building with what looks to be a head of a robotic Iron Man drone. So yeah, that makes me wonder, and I hope this isn't the case, if the characters are just going to be incorporated into the Marvel universe, which I would
think
not.
It's pure marketing thing.
I hope it's like it was before with Dark Horse. Like, we did get crossovers occasionally, like you said, we had Batman versus Predator, and those were really good comics.
Really good. Yeah.
And Green Lantern, as well as Superman, as well as there's been some others like Judge Dredd, Vampirella. So there have been a number of crossovers, and I think that could work pretty well in the Marvel universe. At the same time, it needs to be grounded in its own universe and not incorporated into the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise or whatever. So I
just want to point this out. You might remember on was it Infinity Wars or Endgame? You had Peter Parker literally saying to Iron Man, "Do you remember that old movie, Aliens?"
Yeah.
So there's no way they even can.
No. I don't think they would ever do that, especially not in the movies. No way. Yeah. I'm just thinking only in the comic side of things.
Well, I mean, should we start with the continuity concern then? Because I think that's what a lot of people are worried about is whether, you know, the new run on the Marvel is going to be a restart. I mean, they did it with Star Wars, which caused a fucking uproar, if I do remember rightly.
Oh yeah.
But,
well, I think they said they were going to be building on earlier characters.
That's what I'm getting to, yeah. So while it sort of feels like the precedence is set from their handling of Star Wars, you know, these are completely different properties.
Yeah.
Star Wars is light years ahead of Alien and Predator. You know, it makes much more money and you know, it's a much bigger franchise. But they specifically called out, you know, in the press release, at least when they published it on Marvel's website, the IGN announcement was trash, but IGN's always trash.
Tell us how you really feel.
I love it. I love the shade.
We all know that. I mean, no Alien fan likes IGN after the
isolation review.
The isolation review, yeah. Where is it? Where's the Marvel version? Here it is. Sorry,
go ahead.
So with the Marvel announcement as well, because IGN didn't even fucking say EVP. They just said Alien and Predator.
Which I gotta say, I was super relieved about because
oh god, yeah, me too.
It is hard going as an AVP fan these days because there's not a lot. Like I feel like formerly Fox, now 20th Century Studios, was really focused on Alien and Predator, and they haven't been focused on AVP for a while until we got the comic that started last year, Thicker Than Blood, which so far has been pretty interesting, and I really hope the comic finishes. I'm sure it will this year. But that was the first standalone AVP thing we've had in a long, long time. So for them to mention that as well was good to see.
Well, Marvel said that the new series would feature new and classical characters from Earth and beyond to explore never before seen corners of both the Alien and Predator universes. And it also
whether they mean comic characters or film characters.
Well,
they said classic characters, so I'd imagine they mean probably both, to be honest, in my opinion. Because they don't. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So they say later on in this press release, you know, Marvel's new stories will draw from all these properties, building on decades of multimedia storytelling. So it's that point there, you know, the multimedia storytelling that sort of says that it's not going to be just confined to the films, and that's important to know.
They also mentioned re-releases and compilations as well.
Yeah, down the line, which I think they did with Star Wars as well. Paul, is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. Which is, again, we can get that is a. See, I got so much I got to burst out of here. I don't want to talk too much, but yeah, there is a lot to talk about with these reprint ideas and whatnot. So when we get to the meat, the more of the meat of Marvel, how they'll work the properties, I'll dive into that kind of stuff. But I don't want. Eric hasn't really talked much, so I don't want to start going. Because I'll start going, I won't stop.
How are you feeling about this, Eric?
I mean, you're not as big a comic fan, are you, these days?
Well, it was mainly in my primary school days. I was really getting comics, and then, interesting enough, when the Aliens comic came out in the UK, that's when I got back into them. I don't mind who prints the paper as long as the writing and art is good.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, that's the crux of it at the end of the day.
I know Dark Horse is being praised as this mighty god, but there have been a hell of a lot of duff stories that they've done as well as good ones.
Mm-hmm.
As long as Marvel gets the right people, they've got the money, they've got the connections. As long as they do that, 2 thumbs up. That's what we're all hoping for, because they can do it. But I think we've got to address the gorilla in the room, which is, we know they've done it with at least their superhero continuity, and from what I've heard, some degree of the Star Wars, they do have a reputation for injecting, identity politics into it, often to the detriment of the stories, which is not like representing a character who happens to be XYZ, whatever it is, but they define them by that quirk. Sometimes it's ironically a stereotype of whatever they're trying to do. And, the people they're trying to get to buy the comics, they're often offended at how they've done it. As long as they don't do that, they just concentrate on, with it being science fiction, there's a bigger chance of that because it's more out there in space or whatever. As long as they just concentrate on doing good stories, fantastic. If that opens it up more to, what Marvel is capable of doing, fantastic. If they go down the route of, what was it called? New Warriors, Safe Space and Snowflake, people are, the people who've grown up.
I don't think they're gonna.
Yeah, let's hope they don't. But
I do think there's
grown
always
up with Dark Horse comics and the maturity level of those comics, where a lot of them are going to table flip if they start doing that.
I do think comics have always included a level of social commentary. It just goes to how it's handled, including the Alien series. And I think there's definitely a place for that. And if there are some connections to real world politics, again, it's how gracefully it's handled.
The story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Tristan Jones said on Twitter. Tristan did the artwork for half of Aliens Defiance, and seemed to have quite a hand in the storytelling as well. That was when that comic was good. He said that let me find the exact quote.
Yeah, it was a good quote.
It made me fucking laugh.
He was like, "All of you worried about Alien getting woke, it's never been asleep," or something like that.
Yeah.
Hang on. We need the exact one because it's just
find the quote.
Okay. I love seeing all the commentary from people terrified that Alien and Predator will go woke now that they're at Marvel. Have they not seen any of the Alien films? Alien was never fucking asleep. And yeah, very, very much so.
Yeah.
But it is like Eric says, you know, there is a handling to it as well where it's...
And I feel like Dark Horse has been doing a really good job of that as of late in terms of representation and diversity in their comics. Like, I feel like they've handled it really nicely, in my opinion. So I'm not really cued into the Marvel side of things these days. I've never been a big Marvel comics reader, but I have heard that complaint among a lot of the I guess you would say more veteran fan base, that they feel that the stories are trying to be a little too mainstream. But I don't know. I'm sure that's a whole big can of worms to
that
you can get into. But
thing, isn't it? Yeah,
that's a whole thing. Yeah. You know what? I'll just say this. I am a longtime reader of Marvel comics, and I don't have many problems as a lot of other people about it. And everyone's different. But for me, like, Miles Morales is one of the best comic book characters. Miles is freaking amazing. And you could argue that, minority, whatever. You could argue anything with art. You know what I mean? It's all interpretation and whatever. And for me, their representation is so important in comics and in media and anything. And what Marvel has done is tried to, inject some of that, I think, and some of that people don't like it because some of it doesn't feel organic, and that's their opinion. And I think I want to let them have their opinions. I've liked a lot of the stuff they've kind of done, like the female Thor, Jane Foster's Thor. That was a really good storyline. Miles Morales is a fantastic character. That was all before, I think, this kind of more.
That was back in 2000.
Yeah. And that also came from a lot of Brian Bendis and his and Danny Glover. What's his name? Donald Glover. He had talked about a long time ago about he wanted to audition for Peter Parker, and Bendis used that as other things to bring in a Miles Morales character. That was kind of the inspiration. And again, Miles now is one of the biggest superheroes in the universe, and he's great, and rightfully so. He's a fantastic character. So there's, for me, it's I never saw it as a problem myself, but I could understand where some people they don't like the fact that it's like so intentional. But either way, I haven't had as much issues with it. I will say the New Warriors announcement, the politics aside, just the art looked terrible to me, and I did not have. There's one character that I liked, and it was the Morbius vampire connected one that I liked. But other than that, the art was not my thing. That's just the design's not my thing. That, again, politics aside, but whatever. But yeah, for me, the Marvel, them coming to Marvel is a whole different. Predator and Alien, I think, are going to be. There's a lot of different ways you can handle these properties, and if you bring the Star Wars route, they didn't really. All they basically did was Lucasfilm, and this is where it's different than an Alien and Predator, is that Lucasfilm is an independently owned, or it's a subsidized company of Disney that runs Star Wars, right? So it's not like it's whereas you have Alien and Predator, they're coming from the same studio. There's no one company like a Lucasfilm that does only Star Wars, and that's it. So you're saying 20th Century Studios doesn't really have much autonomy from Disney anymore? I would, well, in my opinion, I think this is, I don't know, and this is where I'm kind of going to get into, because Lucasfilm they have a story group that is dedicated to organizing the continuities of all these things. So everything, quote unquote, is canon that comes out. That's been something that we've been, all the comics.
There's still been a lot of behind the scenes rumors, like, you hear Bob Iger is unhappy with some of the decisions of Kathleen Kennedy, and like, no, just rumor.
Not rumor. I just think that whatever. It's the whole. I'll just say this: the recent rumor of the reboot of the sequel trilogy. I
pretty much thought that wasn't
They
going.
put too many references in things like Rebels to the sequel trilogy to just say we're going to shut it down, and then there'd be no guarantee that whatever they replace would be any better. So
I don't buy that rumor at all. But again, you see with some of the movies that Disney has made, like the firings of the directors, the massive reshoots, like there has been some drama, and I can't imagine that someone higher up like Bob Iger might be like, hey, we need to get some things in order here.
No, totally.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say though is like that Star Wars, when they were, how about this? When they were transitioned into Disney and Marvel, they were running their show. Like they had a company and people that were dedicated to running this specific huge franchise, right? So Lucasfilm, has control of the games and all this stuff and whatever, and that's what their jobs are. Their job was to run Star Wars. Whose job is to run the Aliens and Predator franchises right now? I don't know.
Nobody now.
Exactly. And so this is where it gets interesting.
Well, what was the case with Marvel? Like when Marvel was acquired by Disney, whose job was it to...
Well, that's the thing. The people who are running Marvel were still in charge, but they for Ike Perlmutter. So it gets even more complicated than that, because Ike Perlmutter, when they sold to Disney, he was still ahead of Marvel. Thank God Ike Perlmutter, excuse me, can't talk. I will, by the way, for people who don't know me, I will mispronounce things, mumble, and say things unclearly, so I apologize in advance. So Ike Perlmutter, he was the one running with Avi Arad, were running Marvel in their company. They were Toy Biz, and they bought Marvel when they were like gonna crash, and they bought them low, and they sold very high, obviously, and then they stayed on to run Marvel. And then that's why you had the faction between Kevin Feige and Ike Perlmutter back in the day, when you had the studio, when TV and movies kind of separated. Do you guys hear about that? Back when Daredevil was happening, everything was connected. Well, Ike Perlmutter and Kevin Feige started not getting along. And there was, for instance, like in Iron Man 3, Shane Black, you guys know who Shane Black is. Shane Black, there was going to be, the villain was supposed to be a female. And yes, and the rumor is, and I say rumor, but I'm pretty sure it's fact, Ike Perlmutter vetoed it because girl toys don't sell.
I'd heard about. Yeah, that's wasn't that what prevented a Black Widow movie being made?
Exactly. And then Kevin was not happy, and Ike also wasn't in favor of a Black Panther movie. And so
that one went gangbusters.
Yeah. So this, and again, I'm pretty sure Ike he vetoed. He was not into that either. And again, that one I maybe not be 100% on, but I'm pretty sure I knew it was the female. He didn't like female action figures; they don't sell.
Who was it going to be originally? Then the female.
I don't remember. I think they're just going to have that character that Guy Pearce was going to be just a female, but they still had it in a female villain in the movie. Obviously, that was that extremist.
Did that lead into the whole Mandarin confusion, or was that on purpose?
I think that was a Shane Black thing. I think that they wanted to do. But the reason I bring that up though is because Kevin Feige also wanted to do Civil War, and that almost got vetoed because Ike did not want to pay Robert Downey Jr. a bunch of money. So you have these two entities, or this one company being run by Ike Perlmutter and Kevin Feige, who's making just hand over fist all this money for Disney, can't get along with this guy. He goes to Alan Horn, head of all the, the Disney high up, who does all like their movie stuff. Again, I don't know his exact title. My friend Sean, who I do podcasts with for Marvel, he knows all that stuff. That's more his thing. But basically goes to Alan Horn and says, it's either him or me. I'll walk if you don't let me get independence from Ike. And he goes, done. So they separated Marvel Studios, separated from Marvel Company, essentially. So Kevin only answers to what's his name? Forgot his name already. The guy I just mentioned. But basically he answers to Bob. And so basically Kevin has complete freedom. And then obviously from that separation, Civil War, all that stuff, all is on Kevin.
So Bob does not really. He's probably much more interested in the movies than he is the comic side of things.
Yeah, of course. And now, if you guys heard the rumors, now Ike Perlmutter retired, and is now Kevin now runs all of Marvel. So now, so you're answering kind of. I'm sorry, a long-winded way of answering your question. Initially, Ike Perlmutter was running Marvel. When he sold to Disney, he still ran things. That was his contingents. Like he wanted to be still making that money, and he made he's just a control freak. There's so many reports of he's also known as the most cheapest guy around. So he was just a tyrant. And then finally, Kevin stood up to him, got separation, and then now has been pretty much pushed out of Marvel.
And do a lot of fans like yourself, are you happy with that? Because that was a pretty recent thing, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, right now, the editors still were in charge of Marvel and doing their thing, but Ike still had, would come in and go, why are we doing this? Blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I would say I'm happy. I mean, I'm very curious what Kevin's going to do. I think Kevin's smart enough to let well enough alone and just kind of let the writers and the editors do their thing. And, there's still an editor in chief, CB Sabuski. Yeah, he's the one on your guys' this report here, the press release. He's the one still running the show from the comic perspective. So Marvel still, now that Kevin's in charge of Marvel, he's kind of, over basically the comics. There's an article that if you read from the Hollywood Reporter or Variety, either one, it kind of talks about how the comics they're not exactly this giant moneymaker, right? They look to it as like an R&D department. And so like
stories,
yeah, exactly. And really, and you make some money off of it, and it's great. And I think that's a genius way of looking at it, because the genius of Kevin Feige, and again, I'm not trying to go into a big Marvel Studios thing here, I apologize. The genius of Kevin Feige, in my opinion, is that he doesn't just take one story and goes, I'm going to adapt the story and inject things I want to do into it. No. He takes multiple ideas and storylines, puts them together, weaves it, and makes a fantastic pop culture movie, or a pop movie for people to love. Like Winter Soldier is not a verbatim, adaptation of the original comic. It's heavily, heavily used, but he takes different things. He adds, he puts Falcon as a main player. He does this, he does that. I mean, Falcon's in that story, but he's not a main player. You see what I'm saying? Like he takes things and he adapts it and changes things a little bit. He knows what to cherry pick, and it's great. So
it's like doing a second draft of a movie script.
Yeah. So Kevin, that's who's running Marvel. So when Disney was bought by Marvel, they already had that. Remember, Avengers was just already being worked on and being filmed when they made this purchase. So they had already been like multiple films in with the MCU. So Disney saw that where the going was getting good and said, let's take it now. They took it now, and they just kind of reaped the benefits from that. So Marvel is still running Marvel. When Lucasfilm was purchased, same kind of thing, because again, this is all my Star Wars and Marvel knowledge, guys. So basically, George Lucas already put Kathleen Kennedy in charge of Lucasfilm before the sale. It was in preparation. Apparently, according to Bob Iger's book, Kathleen had no idea George was selling to Disney. But George wanted someone he could trust in that position, which later backfired because Kathleen ended up doing what Bob wanted.
And now you have rumors that there's kind of a, growing tension between Favreau and Kennedy.
Yeah,
because Favreau has had massive success with The Mandalorian. Right. Like, I know opinions, and we won't get too into this, but opinions on the sequel trilogy are pretty divisive after The Force Awakens.
I would agree.
The Mandalorian, I feel Star Wars would be in a much worse place without it right now.
Absolutely.
I feel like the last year, the popularity of that kind of eclipsed The Rise of Skywalker.
Absolutely.
I mean, more people were into and talking about The Mandalorian in my view from what I've seen. So that'll be interesting to see going forward if it becomes a similar type situation as you had with Feige and Perlmutter. Kind of shifting to Star Wars with Kennedy and Favreau.
Well, the thing with Kathleen Kennedy is that she, again, this whole politics and all the rumors aside or whatever, she has done I think a good job. I think, in my opinion, has it been perfect? No, but the movies have been, I think, predominantly better or been good than bad. full disclosure, I'm not a huge Last Jedi fan. So just, that's just me. But that being said, all the movies still made billions of dollars. And look at this now. I mean, look, the movie theaters and Star Wars could very well be a big part of bringing people back to the theaters once they reopen and COVID is gone. I mean, let's be real. I mean, they need IPs now more than ever to get people back in the theater, because they're not going to go see an indie film to get sick. People might consider Black Widow to kind of brave it out there for the first time, to see Black Widow, to see a movie I'm looking forward to, and Dune. I mean, these big tentpole films are going to get people back into the theater, not these smaller films. So even more than ever, these IPs that like Star Wars, even though they're struggling, I think, at the box office to an extent to where Rise of Skywalker didn't make $2 billion. It made only $1 billion. Oh, boo-hoo. Still made $1 billion. That's still big. Exactly. I was worried. I love Rise of Skywalker too, by the way. That's my favorite Disney film, but that's a whole different story. Going back to the transition between Disney and Marvel and Lucasfilm, so it was already in charge of Kathleen Kennedy. So when the sale happened to Disney, they just kind of worked on things and got things kind of, leveled off to where this is where we're going to go, and this is where we're going forward. And they had a plan, and they went a plan, quote unquote, because the sequel trilogy wasn't exactly planned, but they had a business plan of what to do and what they wanted to kind of structurally do. And I think she did a smart move by saying, make everything canon. So when she said that, that's when you got the whole Dark Horse comic book back catalog got rebooted, because we were all wondering what happens to these comics. What happens to the universe?
Well, she went further than that. She made the bizarre statement of saying, "We've never had any books and comics." And if you want to throw it out because it's too bloated, that's fine, but don't deny they existed. Yeah.
So all Marvel Star Wars comics are considered canon. Right?
That is correct. That is correct. Unless they have the Legends banner. Now, the reason why she said that, though, and also this is where it's unfair that the people criticize her, because, again, I'm not the biggest Kathleen Kennedy fan, to be honest, but I'm not a hater either, because she was referencing the Game of Thrones when that was, because she said, we aren't like Game of Thrones and have like a map of where we're going. And that's what she was saying. From a narrative standpoint, she was right. They threw out the treatments of George Lucas, which was a mistake in my opinion, but they were not going from a structure standpoint of like, oh, we'll just do this and just adapt it. That's not what they were doing. She was referencing adapting a specific storyline and like what they were doing, or at least had a map of George R.R. Martin's map. She was referencing Game of Thrones. I understand where people got.
It was just a bad PR line.
I agree. It wasn't worded the best. And I agree that she should have been more respectful of that. But the stuff that came before, there's no way they could have used in a canon capacity, because it all bled. As you guys will probably know from Aliens or Predator comics, all blends in together, and it gets, when they use stuff that gets retconned or whatever, you can't use it. There's a great Star Wars novel called Darth Plagueis, and everyone, that was people said that was probably had the most involvement of Lucas in a long time. And that was written by James Luceno. And that book is phenomenal. It's great. And it probably has a lot of connections from George on it has a lot of those things from that. But you could never make that canon because there's so many EU references that are not canon anymore. So you can't make that canon. So my point is, there was nothing, she was saying there's nothing verbatim that they could adapt that's like straight up. They were creating something new as they went along, and they didn't have anything they could reference and say, oh, we already have the outline. It's right here, whatever. So,
well, as someone who was a big Star Wars fan growing up, I really do appreciate that they've continued to reprint the Legends side of things. I think that's great.
Right. And so what I'm trying to say is that both Marvel and Marvel and Lucasfilm, they had this kind of overhead that kind of led them on to where Disney, all they had to do was kind of say, okay, do your thing. We're going to sit back here and do nothing, or you know what I mean? Like, this kind of do your thing. We'll hover in the background. And what I think is fascinating about the AVP franchises and everything that they've now inherited, my question was, because the first thing this happened, I thought, because again, I love these franchises. I said, will Disney sell them? Because that's the first.
That's what I thought too. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I thought they would maybe sell them to Universal. I know Blumhouse had expressed interest in Alien.
Exactly.
That was my initial thought. I was like, well, Disney's not going to go with Alien. I mean, it's R-rated property, and they're concerned about their brand. But
whereas my view was Disney are nothing if not about merchandising. An Alien Predator, even if you don't release any films, the merchandising is just going to be so lucrative. It's got Disney's written all over that.
But Disney has an interesting relationship with Alien. Kind of, I know before the podcast, Paul, I had mentioned the Disney parks. The former head of Disney, Michael Eisner, actually really wanted an Alien attraction in Walt Disney World. But the Imagineers were horrified because there's like, well, this is an R-rated property. We can't put this in the Magic Kingdom. You're insane. And so they actually brought in George Lucas to convince him to do an original idea called the Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter. And that was an attraction there, which I fucking loved as a kid. But parents complained it was way too scary. So it only lasted for so long.
Wow.
But the Xenomorph actually did end up in a Disney park in Walt Disney World.
Which led to the famous Ridley Scott quote.
Yeah. At Disney's Hollywood Studios, they did this ride called the Great Movie Ride, which it was like a journey through movie history. And one of the scenes was you go into the Nostromo, and there's a Ripley animatronic, and there's a couple xenomorphs that pop out at you. But yeah, the Alien has been in a Disney park, so it is kind of interesting now that they've made a move, I guess, with Marvel. And it makes me wonder, like, could we see Alien in Disneyland again? Probably not, but I would love that.
Oh, I think that. No, you went on. Do you remember that it was a Fox thing, but it was like it was a virtual reality thing? You went in recently.
Yeah. I'm working on a retrospective article for that right now. It's called Alien Ascent.
Yeah, I can see Disney doing something like that at one of their theme parks easily.
They've already done it with Star Wars. There's actually a Utah-based company called The Void, and they did a Star Wars attraction that's at Downtown Disney in Anaheim. I can't remember what it's called, but it's gotten pretty rave reviews. So I want to try that myself next time I'm there.
I think you've also got to remember that it's important not to think of Alien and Predator as Disney properties anyway, because they're still under the 20th century banner.
Yeah, I do believe that if they did release another Alien or Predator film, it would be
under 20th century.
Yeah,
of course. It would.
We're not going to see the Disney castle when
and all the other
Well,
and that's what I'm wondering with Marvel too, because we still have Marvel Max, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. So this one, one of you guys had mentioned that the other day. I'm not sure which one was writing to me at the time, but
it would have been me. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, Aaron. So you had mentioned Marvel Max, and it's very interesting you bringing that up because I'm trying to think, and again, maybe I'm wrong, but they haven't released anything on Marvel Max in a long time. And the last
year.
Was it last year? Okay, because I don't even remember. Like, because I don't see anything. I haven't seen much. The last thing I remember was Miracle Man, which, by the way, is phenomenal. If you guys haven't read Miracle Man is incredible, and it's written by Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman. So go read it. It's phenomenal.
That's some fucking pedigree there.
Oh yeah. In fact, that was the first thing. I think Alan helped Neil get into the business through Miracle Man, and Miracle Man was pre-Watchmen. And it's superhero based, but it's basically the same idea, deconstructing the ideas of superheroes, and it's phenomenal. Like, it's on Comixology, go get it. It's worth it. It famously didn't get completed, and Marvel, bringing back Marvel again, Marvel had bought the character, long story. They had finding the rights to print these comics that were out of print. And Neil, actually, are you guys familiar with the 1602 Marvel comic at all? Like, where it's like pirates and stuff like that. Neil Gaiman.
Seen it? I've not read it.
Yeah, that was made for Neil to basically pay for lawyers to fight Todd McFarlane to get the rights to Miracle Man back, and then Marvel eventually. Or something like that. And then basically Marvel bought the character outright, finally started reprinting the comics like 4 or 5 years ago after more legal stuff happening. And Neil, and this is all adult comics, Neil finally was going to complete the story. And they keep pushing the comic back, but that's going to be an adult comic. Like that's, kind of like in the vein of Predator and Alien. And I think it's under the Marvel Max line still, but there hasn't been much. But I haven't read a ton of Alien and Predator comics, but what's interesting, I just started reading all these before, like it's very serendipitous of me to start reading all these comics right beforehand, right? And I read Earth War, which I fucking loved, by the way. It's phenomenal. I really loved it.
The only one in the world.
What?
Oh wait, no, Earth War or Earth.
It's female, whatever it's called.
Earth War,
was it the one with Ripley in it?
No one likes that?
No one likes that.
A lot of people don't like the artwork in that one specifically.
Dude, okay, Sam Keith's artwork isn't great. It doesn't fit. But other than that, I think the story is phenomenal. It's my sequel. That's my Alien 3. Sorry.
You should check out the Alien 3 alternate screenplay comic they released last year. Yeah, that was a good one.
Haven't read it yet. Really quick, I want to ask you guys. I have the audio drama and I have the comic. Which one should I do first?
The comic, and then listen to the audio drama.
Okay, cool. All right, because I had the audio one. I've been meaning to listen to it for a long time. So, but anyway, yeah, the Marvel Max line. When I was reading these Dark Horse comics, I was like, oh yeah, because they say shit and they have lots of blood and whatever. And then when Marvel basically beat out basically, whatever, started posting the whole thing. Sorry, I got distracted. My wife just texted me. I was like, man, how's Marvel gonna publish these? Because there's lots of swearing in them and they're very gory. And I started thinking to myself, in that press release, they mentioned they're going to reprint these comics. They go out and say that, like, hey, you're reprinting that. We're going to reprint these old stories. I went, okay, well, that's not going to make Predator and Aliens fans happy if they start censoring the stuff, right? Like, that's not going to make any of us happy.
That will go down very poorly. Nobody likes censorship.
So, first thing I thought of is, you guys are all familiar with Conan the Barbarian, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, recently Marvel just acquired, weirdly, which I don't know why, but years ago they used to license all kinds of stuff, comics like Conan, Star Wars, whatever. And then they lost the license or the whatever, and then Dark Horse printed it. And then sadly they got the license back from Dark Horse, because Dark Horse is struggling now, I guess now. So anyway, Marvel started publishing Conan comics, and I'm like, that's weird. Why would Disney let Marvel publish Conan the Barbarian comics? Because they don't own the property, they're just licensing it. So I thought that was very interesting. So I'm not a Conan fan really, and I remember this all kind of remind me of that. And so I said, okay, I went to Marvel Unlimited, which those who don't know, that's basically the Netflix subscription to Marvel Comics. And it's amazing. I love it. So I went to go look at Conan comics to get an idea of what might Marvel do with a more violent character like Conan the Barbarian, right? Well, Conan the Barbarian is not on their their comic subscription service that is used at all. And what's also interesting is that he has been integrated in the Marvel universe as well with Savage Avengers. Savage Avengers is not on Marvel Unlimited as well. And I went to Twitter. I went to the online, obviously. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm not looking right. And I looked on, and other people said, no, they can't find it. And someone said it might be a license issue. Well, I got a hold of the comics, and somehow, I'll just say that. And I looked through them. Very violent, very sexualized. And more so than, in my opinion, maybe my interpretation, maybe this is not, I'm more of a prude than most people. I don't know, but it seemed more so than any other Marvel comic that I had read.
Did it have the Marvel branding rather than the Max branding?
Oh. No, Max. It's 12 plus, I believe.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's what I was wondering about, is because the teaser images we see, I mean, they wouldn't have this decided yet, but they say Marvel, like Alien and Predator have the Marvel branding.
Exactly.
So I think that's going to be one of the biggest questions that fans have is this going to maintain a adult tone with the Marvel branding? And if it does, that's an interesting kind of, I guess, opening up that Disney's doing.
In that regard.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I often bring up Hellraiser, which is notoriously gory film.
Yeah.
And we've talked about before that Disney for a while had even the rights to the Hellraiser films. Back in, and now I was just checking up on this on Wikipedia. This started between 89 and 92, so this went way back, and then it went from 92 to 94. There was a company called Epic Comics, which were an imprint of Marvel Comics, and they did the Hellraiser comics. And those were very, very, very adult in nature, often sexual themes as well as just full-on mutilation. They were, for people who don't know, that an imprint is it's an imprint of a publisher is a trade name under which it publishes a work. So, like with Miramax and Disney for certain films, that was what Marvel Comics used to do Hellraiser comics with. Mm-hmm. So if you look at that as well as some of the stuff that's been, I know Aaron, you showed us some images from very recently Punisher stuff. Mm-hmm. You can actually track this going way back into 1989. Marvel was doing this with comics, very adult rated stuff. And Hellraiser is about as horror themed as you can get, especially the comics, because they actually went more so than the films, bizarrely enough.
And so, and again, I have not dove into the full range of Aliens and Predator comics than I'd like to. I haven't read the recent ones, and I'm excited to go through and binge this stuff and listen to you guys' reviews of them and whatnot. But I will say they're not like, I don't think they're Marvel Max material either.
Some of them get pretty fucked up. Like,
no, sure, you're right.
You can attest to this, Aaron, right? Like,
but I guess what I'm trying to say is that not all of them are, because I've read, because I went through the first omnibus of Aliens, and I went through the first two omnibuses of the Predator, from Dark Horse, and there's definitely violence and there's swearing and whatnot, but they're not completely like over the top. Not all of them are over the top. I know there's some that are out there probably there, whatever, but I guess my thing is there's three options they could go with here with Marvel. There's a Marvel Max line, but you got to remember, what kind of market you're limiting your market completely with these characters if you make it a Max title, because that means the teenagers are not going to be able to readily buy it immediately, right? Like the audience you're going for may not even be able to know exist because of the limitations you can have with marketing these comics. The second thing it would be is creating another imprint or having your Marvel title with it, but not having it completely associated with the Marvel branding of characters. Even though they did that, this is what funny enough, they do that with David Finch right off the bat with having Guardians of the Galaxy and with Iron Man, which I didn't even know the Guardians of the Galaxy reference. I just saw Alien. I'm like, oh, Alien looks beautiful. And I didn't even notice the Walkman. But then you also could, just throw it and make tame it down a little bit and have it be towards the Marvel subscription thing, because that's the thing you got to look at. Because right now the Conan comics that are, I told you, that are a lot more violent than the ones the regular Marvel comics anyway that I looked at. And Marvel does get weird. I mean, let's be real. If you haven't read Immortal Hulk, then you guys don't know. Like it gets bonkers, man, and it's weird. It gets violent. And it's not just kidified. It's aimed at an adult audience, and it's not like, again, it's not like R-rated where you have like maybe naked women flying out of whatever.
It's not like crossed or whatever.
Yeah.
Aaron, so the images you showed me that were pretty messed up from the Punisher, is that the Max line or is that?
Yes. Yeah, okay. That's the Max stuff.
Yeah.
But did I not?
I do think that's going to be a bit of a balancing act, because if you do make it mainstream and sacrifice the adult tone, you're going to make a number of fans unhappy.
And we've already been through this with the first AVP film as well.
Yeah, it was PG-13. A lot of fans were pissed. They made the next one rated R. So
and literally slammed it in the title.
More people.
But here's my thing though, because I don't again, go look at that. Find somewhere to look at that first Conan trade. Go look at images from the new Marvel.
Is it not on Comixology?
It's on Comixology Unlimited. So if you just look through that, and if you guys, I think you can sign up for free. So if you guys want to kind of test it out, look at that first Conan graphic novel. I look at that and say, he's chopping off people's heads. I mean, like it's a violent thing. I'm not sure what more you'd want from that, from Aliens, as far as like, people's heads chopped off and body parts flying, all that jazz. That's what we want. We want that violent tone to still be possible and intact for the integrity of the storylines, correct? So I think it can all be there and not be a Marvel Max line, because I think there is a happy medium of PG-13. You know, again, the AVP movie, man, I like that movie, by the way. But you definitely could have made it more violent and have it still be PG-13. How about that? And you could do a lot more you could still do a lot with PG-13 and with not having it be completely R-rated. Because what makes an R-rated film? Excessive amounts of blood. Well, what if it's just excessive amounts of Alien and Predator blood? I mean, I guess
they would have got away with it if it was creature
exactly. I think that's the issue. I think more than anything.
I mean,
right?
this goes to the core also of what they're going to do with Deadpool, because they have announced he's going to be in the MCU.
Didn't one of the directors say we'd be making the third movie already if it wasn't for Disney with Deadpool?
I think Ryan Reynolds said that. I thought.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
maybe it was him.
And I think Disney doesn't know. Again,
they're probably finding their footing with this kind of stuff, because Deadpool is very profitable, and that is also something that's a Marvel comic that's adult. Like,
well, yeah,
and Deadpool is not Marvel Max either, right? It's just Marvel branded.
I think there are, now I'm remembering, I think there is some Deadpool adult comics now, but not really before. I mean, that's the whole weird thing about Deadpool. He's always been a PG-13 character. And then people are trying to act like when the R-rated came out, like, oh, he's an R-rated character, he has to be R-rated. I'm like, no, he really doesn't. Like, you could do Deadpool PG-13 very, very easily. You eliminate some F words and maybe some of the lewd, like, sexual stuff a little bit, and you have Deadpool. But
they tried
Deadpool
doing that. I mean, they tried re-releasing a cut of Deadpool 2 that was PG-13, and it flopped. Yeah. So,
but again, like the R-rated
because people had already seen the films.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, but here's the thing too. They appealed to that audience. They went for a hard R to again. I think for a novelty aesthetic for Deadpool, in my opinion. Again, that's I own the first appearance of Deadpool. I've read a bunch of Deadpool comics. I like Deadpool. He's a little oversaturated right now. Not really. I need a break from him, but. I remember you can listen to my show. I've said this should not have been R-rated. You could have made this PG-13, and all the jokes could have been in there for the most part. I mean, my opinion, except for the sex joke, the big sex whatever scene where they're banging on every holiday or whatever it is, which is funny, by the way, I will say. But that aside, I mean, like, you could have made that movie PG-13, and it'd probably be even more successful. And I think there's a balance, and I think that. For me, and again, this is where I think I'll be controversy, and maybe you guys will disagree with me. I think you can make a Predator and an Alien film PG-13 as long as the story's good.
No, I disagree. I think fans gonna riot, man. I'm telling you. Like,
yeah, I'm sure
you make a PG-13 Alien movie, fans gonna riot. That's not gonna be good.
I've said many times before, the most disturbing scene in Alien is not Kane's death; it's Lambert, and virtually all that is off screen. I think so long as the writing was good, and it would have to be very good. I think there are creative ways of going about where you don't have to show full. I mean, Aliens, there is gore in it, there is blood, you see a chest burster, but there's relatively little. Yeah, that's looked upon as like probably just as good as Alien, if not in many people's minds. Well, so.
I think the R rating is just part of the series identity at this point.
And I agree with that. So, that was the point. Yes,
well, I think I mean, creative. But even Lambert's thing, even though we don't see it and it's sort of open to interpretations, it's a very sexualized route that people tend to go down for her death.
Yeah, but you could release it under a low. It doesn't have to be an adult. Like if the film that was the only, if it wasn't for Kane's death, you had a film released with Lambert's death. You could have got away with that with a much lower age rating. That's all about suggestion.
I don't think so. But I think R rating also comes down to tone a bit too.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's
not just content in my. No, I mean, I'm not sure how all the intricacies of the MPAA work, but I think tone is part of it.
Yeah, we need to invite someone on from there.
That'd be amazing. Honestly. Well, because think about this: Aliens. Like, what in Aliens is R-rated besides F words? If you think about it, you can edit out F words. That is a complete creative. What's the word I'm looking for?
You guys don't have that fucking middle ground. That's your problem. I mean, over here.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Over here, when we got the director's cut of Alien, it was released as a 15. whereas originally it had been an 18. So, you know, sensibilities had changed. And pretty much all of them since have been 15s, apart from... No, AVP even. AVP, I think, was actually a 15. Yeah, that didn't come out as a 12 for us.
Yeah.
So
you guys have a different rating system entirely.
So, yeah. we have that nice, tidy middle ground that you Americans don't. And...
At the same time, Paul, it sounds like you can get away with more in a mainstream comic than you can in a PG-13 film.
And that I would agree with. And that's where I'm saying that I think that it may not be as jarring as you think, the transition, than what you guys are thinking about. I think as far as like tone and that kind of stuff, I wouldn't worry about that, in my opinion, because I think if you're worried about tone, look at the Conan the Barbarian comics. Go read Immortal Hulk. It's amazing. Like, trust me, like you won't regret it. You'll be like, this is incredible. Lots of really cool stuff. But like, to me, this is, again, what I wanted to kind of talk about with you guys as well, was the creative side, as far as I think the talent that Marvel can bring. Now, you brought up, Adam, the idea of, you know, Dark Horse and the, you know, that Marvel is the king. It is the king of comics. Now, I am an old school punk rocker. I want to say it right now, and I don't love corporations completely. And I know that corporations are bad sometimes, and it just sometimes I don't like big business completely, you know. And I love things like Dark Horse Comics that are independent, creative, and don't have this thing of like, we have to move this many units, and if you don't, you're gone, kind of a mentality. There's more of an artistic freedom, obviously, with Dark Horse, and I think that you can't downplay that. And I want to make that very clear, that that's one thing about Dark Horse that I've always appreciated, going from the Star Wars. We talked about George Lucas. When he had the license at Dark Horse for Star Wars, George had let the writers have a lot of freedom, you know, within reason, of course, to do what they wanted. That's the artist in George. In Dark Horse, the same thing. Like, there's some bonkers stories in Dark Horse Star Wars comics, and just like there's bonkers stories in Dark Horse Aliens and Predator comics. So there are going to be some sacrifices, I think, as far as like the zaniness and the really out there concepts to an extent. Now, that being said, Marvel, we talked about before, Marvel, that article that I referenced about Kevin Feige and whatnot, that they use the comics as an R&D almost at this point to kind of see what is working with an audience, what is gelling with these people, what are people liking in the comic industry, because it is kind of a microcosm of a greater mainstream audience. Not completely, but to an extent.
Yeah.
That being said, there is a lot more freedom, and you can get away with a lot more things, like you said, Adam, than in a comic book than you can in a PG-13, maybe R-rated film. It just really depends. Now, with that being said, I think what Marvel can bring these franchises, and I think I'm curious if you'd agree, is that it brings them on a level that Dark Horse never could. From a marketing standpoint, I think that these comics are going to be marketed a little bit better. And let's be real, comics are not marketed great in general, but it's a little bit better than the Dark Horse comics. There's a marketing aspect of this that's going to be out there, and it's going to be more welcoming, and they're going to recognize. And I think, in my opinion, the type of talent that Marvel will be able to bring these titles is giant, because one of the things that I, as a reader of Star Wars comics, is that they have, you know, obviously Marvel has a lot of, you know, people they use on a regular basis or have exclusive contracts with. Even though I don't know if this guy would be great for a Aliens or Predator comic, but I love Charles Soule. This guy pretty much only written for Marvel. And when they got Star Wars, he started a couple years later doing a phenomenal Darth Vader comic book. That's one of my favorite Darth Vader.
I've heard the new Vader comics are really great.
Volume 2, whole thing, incredible. And not, I'm sorry, the art too, phenomenal. And I didn't think the art was going to be good, to be honest, at first, or at least fit the character. And I was wrong. But the thing with Marvel is they're going to have, I'm not saying Dark Horse doesn't have talent, but Marvel has access to the top talent. They can throw the money at the people that like are going to get people to read the AVP comics that maybe wouldn't pick it up normally. Like, let's say, and then this is me just throwing out names. Are you guys familiar with a Jonathan Hickman?
Uh-uh.
Jonathan Hickman wrote. He's writing he's relaunching X-Men right now. He's not an exclusive Marvel writer, but he's mainly worked with Marvel, and he's done his own image work as East of West. He did East of West, if you're familiar with that. He's not my favorite writer, but he's a really good writer, and he is tailor-made for Alien, in my opinion. He's really complex, long stories, great ideas, and to me, if you put Jonathan Hickman on an Alien comic, the comic industry would blow up. And you put him with David Finch, one of the top comic artists that put out those, that blows my mind right now. That would be top comic news right off the bat, just because of Jonathan Hickman's name alone. That's kind of stuff that Marvel has access to and the money to throw at these creatives to get you. I mean, I know right now, Brian Wood is writing the Aliens comics, and he's worked with Marvel.
They took him off after some accusations last year.
Oh yeah, because that was the same guy. I want to make sure, but he was writing. But then that's the kind of guys that are writing the comics for Dark Horse. And
that's one. I mean, there's a whole variety, and
right. But
so I mean,
top talent, in my opinion, at Marvel.
One of the main things I'm wondering too is, I mean, Dark Horse has rebooted their own continuity a number of times. Right. With Alien and Predator, and that's always been kind of a question I've had with these franchises. It's like, do you allow for self-contained stories in the expanded universe, and even in some cases in your main films, like might have been done with Blomkamp's Alien 5 had it been made, or do you have everything fit together perfectly? Do you have a story group and make sure everything fits as canon? And I feel like with Alien, just the format alone works better if you allow writers to kind of do their own thing a bit. Now, and that's the question with Marvel. Are they going to allow that? Or is there going to be story coordination, like every story needs to be canon within the expanded universe or even within the main Alien universe now? I don't know. So that'll be an interesting question going forward.
People don't realize that is what they were doing with Alien and Predator over the last 6 years anyway. I mean, there was a separation between theatrical and everything else, but that everything else, that was being sort of looked at as an overarching continuity. You might not necessarily think that, because we still got lots of individual series. We had Dust to Dust, we had Dead Orbit. Those sit on their own, and some of the books do as well.
Yeah, but they would still fit. They just don't all reference each other.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think, but they also still had this overarching multimedia plan, which, encompassed the books, it encompassed the comics, and the new game, the new Cold Iron game.
What the hell is going to happen with that? Well, I mean, the comic was canceled, so that'll be all in the Titan book now, that tie-in, which again begs the question, like, I don't think Disney's is nearly involved with novel publishing as they are comic publishing, like with Star Wars and stuff. So
and again, the comic publishing is only because they own a comic book company.
Yeah,
but they don't run it like. Again, like I said, Marvel has their people. They let Marvel, like Pixar, all these companies, they run their own things. Disney just is from the background, and when they start losing money or they start making bad decisions, that's when the Bob Igers
start wagging their fingers.
Yeah, they start whacking people off.
I don't think people realize just how much autonomy these other brands have, and I don't think they realize that they have a lot of these other brands. Because when Disney was talking about buying it, the concern was, it's going to be kiddified, it's going to be princesses. But no, they have always had their own separate outlets to put out the stuff. Disney put out fucking Kill Bill and Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, Miramax.
Yeah, well, Miramax, they don't
want to make money.
Make films anymore, do they? I think Disney's
not anymore.
No, but they've got 20th Century Studios to fill in that niche now. Exactly. People need to stop, and it's the same with the comics. People need to stop this high-level reaction of Disney equals kiddie.
I think we need to wait and see if it feels like the content is not to the same adult level as it was before. Now, I don't think it. I think you're right, Paul. Reaction. It doesn't need to be there for the sake of it. You don't need to make it hard R for the sake of being hard R. But if the story calls for that, if the integrity of what the writers want to tell call for that, and
the leniency.
Marvel prohibits that, I think you have a problem, because Dark Horse has not prohibited that. So
the point is that there are examples of this stuff being out under their banner without being taped.
But you see, the reason why there's this overreaction, people need to realize it's because Disney has been so good at covering the tracks of their family brand. They separate them. There is only this thing, they must make it a Disney princess thing. And you look at the reason they don't look at the bulk of that stuff is because they have no idea it's Disney. Yeah. It's like it's like being a CGI artist.
At the same time, you do see a lot of
best work will never be seen.
At the same time, you do see a lot of hardcore. Again, bringing it back, you see hardcore Star Wars fans and hardcore Marvel fans that are like, it was better before Disney took it.
And that's their opinion. I disagree with that. But that's a small minority, because what's weird. Here's the thing: when Star Wars was bought by Disney, there was a very loyal. It wasn't as big though. It was big, but like the people that were buying the books and those people that were upset when they retconned everything, that was still a small portion of people. But since the reboot, there's a massive plethora of people that are reading the books now that weren't before.
That's true.
And you want to know why? It's because they rebooted everything and they made it more friendly for people to jump on these books. And that's the purpose of these reboots. It's not just to piss people off and say, we don't care about these stories anymore. They're trying to get new people into them, because to be honest, to me, this whole thing is leading up to 20th century, obviously leading up to them doing more with these franchises. Like this is the first big thing to drop. We talked about that before.
And you have Avatar, you have X-Men, and Fantastic Four. So
to me, this is them working with what they've got in a small way. Again, it's comics, it's small, and talking about the continuity and everything. That is like a whole like podcast series you could talk about, as far as what you do, as far as do you make it all connected? I think at this exact moment, and my question to you guys is, what is the most profitable to you? Or what do you think is the most profitable? Whether your preference doesn't matter. What is the most profitable?
I think you have to, this goes to the question of, by trying to appeal to everyone, you appeal to no one. So I feel like it's a balancing act. I feel like they have to maintain the integrity of the stories and they have to please the hardcore, longtime loyal fans. At the same time, I feel like they can market it in a way and write new interesting stories in a way that you will attract new readers. One doesn't have to be at the expense of the other. And I feel like sometimes it is.
Okay, so here's let me explain this bit, or ask this a little bit better. Would you want them? Let's assume that this Marvel announcement, whenever they write this new stories, are going to be a new continuity, right? And let's say, because I was telling the guys from the Perfect Organism, I'm like, are they? To me, in my opinion, if I was 20th century, I'd be like, we're rebooting the whole damn thing. Meaning this like Star Wars, you're going to say these things are canon. Anything that's not this before is not canon. Not saying these stories aren't good and not going to reprint them and sell them and all that stuff, but you're going to say going forward, we're going to be all connected or whatever. These are things are going to be the connected tissues, or you be very specific exactly, and you be consistent with that. So, and again, I don't know if it's more profitable for them to make all the video games and the comics and the books like Star Wars canon with the films or live action. I don't know. But to me, that's what I would do. I would just do a full-on reboot, because the problem is there's no jumping on point for these new people that are vaguely familiar with the franchise.
You could, as long as they stay faithful to the universe that the films have created, Alien, Predator, and AVP. At the same time, again, Dark Horse has rebooted their own continuity a number of times, so not everything with that fits together. So I feel like, I don't think it should be as clearly defined as Star Wars. You should not have, this is Dark Horse Aliens Legends and this is new Marvel Aliens and Predator comics. You should have it so if they want to continue on an older Dark Horse story that they like, that's popular, that resonated with audiences, they can do that. But they don't have to say like, everything is Dark Horse is canon, we're going to build upon that. They can be like, you liked this Dark Horse story? Well, maybe we'll continue that as long as it fits in line with the films. So I feel like they can they don't have to define it like they did with Star Wars with Legends and new canon. They can just choose what they want to build upon with Dark Horse. That would be how I would do it.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're in a completely different level of continuity and background. I mean, the very first fucking Alien comics were already wiped out by the first film, which then led to a dirty retcon anyway. I say dirty in terms of how well it was cleaned up to fit in with stuff.
Right.
Talking about Wilkes and
Billy,
yeah.
But then you still had reference to things like Vasquez and Drake and Hudson and stuff like that.
Never explained Ripley.
In the comics, she was never explained. So I didn't. It's a thing with people getting themselves wound up over these comics because they never really had a very tidy continuity in the first place. A lot of,
and I think that's okay. Like, look at the original screenplay comics; those are great. They have nothing to do with the rest of the Dark Horse continuity. So it's nearly a non-point, to be honest, if they do reboot the continuity, because aside from the multimedia campaign following Isolation and Cold Iron,
well, that was all tied into that, so that was all in. So that would be the only potential victim of a reboot, because that Cold Irons would tie into Echo, and that was also supposed to tie in with Rescue and all that kind of
but
stuff.
Since that comic was canceled, I think the only thing they have to worry about is Titan's book, and as far as we know, Titan's not going anywhere. So
it's kind of a moot point, you know. People were complaining about Noguchi and Deshande and Paul Church and all that, and it's like, well, nothing's been done with them for years. Machiko's storyline was purposefully wrapped up 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Just because, and theoretically, just because if they do reboot the continuity, they're not going anywhere. They're still going to be reprinted because Marvel still wants to make money. Canon is such a frustrating concept. Absolutely. Because ultimately it means fuck all to me and you.
I'm all for just have your head canon, right? Pick the stories you like and go with those. Right. That's what I do it. So
the reason I bring that up though is because I think that you want to, because for me as a fan, because I come at it a little different than you guys, I think, because I like to immerse myself in whatever I love. It looks like you guys do. And I like it to all be cohesive because I like to know the novel that I read also is in line with the comic that I'm reading. That's just me. And that's just me. Not everyone's like that. And there's no right or wrong. Trust me.
If they made a concerted effort to do it, I think that would be fine. The problem was with Alien and Predator. It's never really been like that, as I said, until the last 6 years when they actually had a story. Well, not necessarily a story group in name, but in function.
Sure.
They had a story group at Fox doing it.
What 20th Century needs to have, and maybe they do, they just haven't announced it yet. You guys will probably already know about it though, honestly, if they did. But they need to have someone like it's like how DC has Kevin, whatever his name is, the guy he's running DC Films now, he was part of James Wan's horror. He's a producer on his horror movies. And now he's pretty much running the film side of the DC EU. Now, what they need is someone who's in charge of the AVP franchises, all that stuff, and at least, or a group of people, like a story group that's either in charge of the films or just the whole franchises in general, and at least knowing and trying to get behind. Because here's the thing, this is lucrative. This is still a lucrative. These are still things that can make money. The fact that they didn't sell them like I thought they might, because I'm like, well, if they don't think they're that lucrative, they'll probably sell them, but they're not. Like, they're putting out comics. Now we're starting to see they're
iconic characters, and they know it, regardless of some of the missteps of the films and the eyes of a lot of people.
And this is showing awareness still resonate with people.
Exactly. So to me, I think that this is where they need to go. Okay, they need to have someone in charge, because I listen, I'm all for giving people creative license and like giving and having the most creative, best voices on any story, whether it be comic book, novel, audiobook, whatever it is. I want people to have freedom to tell their stories. But when these commercial properties and that we love, there needs to be, like you kind of said, Adam, there needs to be like, theme wise, there needs to be, or you said tone wise, it needs to be something that's in line with the fans, what they want to see. Yeah. Can't please everyone, of course, but you at least can understand where you're going in the audience. You have to understand the audience. And I think that's why I think they need to have people in charge of at least like looking over the stories and saying, this is good, approving them and keeping that continuity in base. Because the more, I think, in my opinion, you make it all inclusive and you actually stick to that, you have successful things, like maybe a successful novel or a successful comic or video game. People will go, oh, I really like that. And you can advertise, or they know, oh, there's comics about this too. I'll go back and read the comics. And oh, they reference this video game that I love. Cool. I mean, eventually these films, or in my opinion, these Hulu series that Predator and Alien is like tailor-made for. And right now, as we know, Predator and Alien are not really coming off of the greatest theater.
No, they are not.
And so to me, I was telling the guys yesterday, AVP should be like the new reboot. That should be like the next thing they put out is a new Alien versus Predator.
It's due one, yeah. It's
due one.
And kind of going back to the violence thing a little bit, the Marvel series, like the Punisher, like Daredevil, they're pretty adult, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, dude. Yeah. Like the Daredevil comic is like read the new Daredevil comic. Like he's flying out the window all bloodied up, and Marvel Comics is not doing like kidified things. Again,
no,
read Immortal Hulk.
It's awareness, isn't it? People need to be aware of stuff rather than making the knee-jerk reactions.
And Aaron, you and I were really surprised. One of the few Alien novels not to be published by Titan in recent memory, Echo, was the first Alien book marketed specifically as a young adult novel. And we had a very knee-jerk reaction to that at first too, like, oh, Alien's gonna be Twilight now, like what? But no, it was really good, and it had some violence and stuff. So, and
but again, I mean, even that's just knee-jerk just from the word young adult.
Exactly.
I mean, you've got to fucking Hunger Games is young adult.
Yeah,
it's fucking. It's about 12 kids getting together to slaughter each other. I mean,
Battle Royale.
Yeah, it was Battle Royale. Fucking love that film, by the way, and the book.
That's a great
the first. I haven't seen the other ones, but I like the first one a lot. But the young adult thing is funny too, because as a Star Wars fan, I don't read books, man. Like I just don't. Like I'm a comic book guy. I'm a film and comic book guy. Like that's just me. And when Star Wars, when I started getting into Star Wars again, and they started doing the relaunches of all these new books, I saw the same thing you guys did, young adult. You're like, ugh, what does that mean, right? Young adult. And I just kind of go, and it's called Lost Stars, and it's aimed at a young audience or younger audience for sure. But I'll be damned, it's probably the best Star Wars novel that come out, like since the new canon got released. And yes, it's not perfect, but it's definitely my favorite one of them. And it's a new manga comic series too. It's fantastic. And so like we talked about creative choices and whatnot. You can do a lot with a little, you know what I mean? Like it's a matter of the creative choices and the tone. And like you said, Adam, like the tone is huge. And I don't think R-rated always is the same tone. I mean, R-rated is just like excessive amounts of things that like need to be censored, but tone isn't always censored. You don't have to censor tone necessarily. You know what I'm saying? Like you can have creepy, dark tone in a PG-13 film or a young adult novel or a Marvel comic that's not, aimed at, X-rated or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like you can have that stuff.
It's not explicit. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about Lambert's death. But I mean, it strikes to the core of when you were saying earlier about when you're doing a cohesive, overarching continuity, vetting is going to be incredibly important when you come to do that. Mm-hmm. We started back when Fire and Stone came out. That was meant to be this big renewed push by Dark Horse to do an overarching continuity. And right off the bat, you had things like the Deacon from Prometheus turning into a geological landmass. No reason. It was just that WTF. And you had, people in Hadley's Hope in Aliens being all slaughtered and killed. When you looked at the film, it was, they have all their surgically implanted trackers. You knew they'd all been impregnated. They weren't necessarily paying attention to what had gone before, or even, I'm sure, whatever the hell that Deacon storyline, I assume it was originally meant to be going somewhere, but it never actually did. So you've got to vet the right kind of talent. Now, all you would know is...
Though.
Yeah.
That was the
Marvel
disconnect between
better
film
at vetting the right talent.
But that's the thing, though.
Priority.
The disconnect between the films and the books and the comics, and that's the thing where I think I'll say again, having it all in one continuity is definitely there's pros and cons to anyone you choose with pros and cons. To me, having it under one cohesive continuity and having a group of people in charge of the books, novels, and the comics, that's so crucial. I mean, look at this. There's a new Star Wars series starting out next year called The High Republic. And it is a book and comic book crossover. It's the first of its kind. And to me, this is something that the AVP franchises need to look at and see how successful and how well it's done, because they got these writers and they all put their ideas out there, and then now they're going to be crossing over the first of its kind, a actual multimedia thing of, instead of comic books all crossing over, it's different mediums crossing over. And that's,
I think Dark Horse has done that with Titan a bit, have they not, Aaron? They've coordinated on a few stories.
Not massively.
I mean, you had the Marines stationed at Hadley's Hope and stuff like that.
They're not just connected. These are actually going off of each other. Like one's going into another, is going to bleed to another, maybe different time frames, but they are literally answering things that happen from the comics to the books. And now this is going to be a small idea of what everyone wants the films and the comics and the books to do together. They want the films to cross over to the comics, and that's a harder thing to do, but you get what I'm saying. That's what Star Wars fans, that's what it feels like they're building to, is that this is like a smaller idea of that. I think that's what the AVP franchises need to do. They need to have this set of people who are, their job is only to produce and control and create this AVP content and approve these things and make sure they have some kind of cohesion. So that way, people like us, when we buy this stuff, we're like, man, this is like totally out there. This is not even connected to Alien Isolation or this Predator comic or Predator Hunting Grounds, whatever. I mean, imagine if you had Hunting Grounds combined with not only a prequel novel that I saw that was coming out or had come out, but you had a comic series, and you knew that like they're all speaking together, and you knew that maybe this was tied into a potential film or whatever. I mean, these are all things that I think that people want to have. They want to have ownership of, and also feel like it's worth all getting together. To me, if I buy Alien Isolation game, which I do, I haven't played it yet, which I need to. It's been on my to play this forever. And to know, if I knew there was like comics and books that were all connected with that, and then I also knew that the Aliens comics over here also had reference to this that would be referenced in the game or whatever, I'd be like, that's awesome. Like that makes me want to invest in the franchise even more. Instead of just having all isolated, or single storylines that are all like not connected. I mean, everyone's preference is different, but that's just for me as a consumer at this point.
Well, they were doing both. That is what they were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just...
Well, I mean, it's like with the last Predator film, you had The Predator. Now, I didn't read, but I know, Aaron, I don't know if you also did, Adam. You did a podcast episode where you looked at the prequel novel to that, and as I understand it, the prequel novel to The Predator was much more
better than the Predator
quality
itself.
Yeah,
now,
they
they had coordination with the people who were working on the film, but I'm assuming it wasn't nearly of the same standard of quality because there wasn't one person or a small group of people coordinating it. Whereas you've got Warhammer 40k, which is an incredibly mature property. They're bringing out a TV series with that, but the reason why there is a lot of positive anticipation for that is because you've got Dan Abnett, who incidentally was I think the lead writer in Alien Isolation. Yeah. Now, he was in charge of the Eisenhorn books. He wrote them, and that's what they're being adapted. He is writing, or partly involved around that, in the writing for the TV show. Now, that's the way to do it. But when you have disparate groups of people, they're coordinating, but they're not working towards like a singular vision. It's like when you got on the Terminator Genesis, even within the production team itself of that one film, you had people interviewing them for magazine articles, and you had like the producer was working from a completely different timeline than somebody else on the production team, and somebody else had a completely different timeline. And especially when you're working within a property that deals with time travel, if you're going to have anything nailed down, it needs to be the timeline.
Yeah.
You need to have coordinate. It's not just people speaking to one another being on the same page. You have to have a singular vision for how the entire collective thing is going to fit together. And I think that's kind of what's been lacking a bit with Alien and Predator.
I mean, there's certainly been attempts. It's like I said, the last 6 years they attempted to do this, at least with Alien, but it's not like. I mean, we'd all certainly like it at a higher level, wouldn't we? We'd like a guy who's there saying, "Okay, be careful of doing this in your film because they're doing this in the books, and be careful of doing that." But it's never ever worked that way with us.
But
because
here's
of the
an
caliber.
Example. If we did hear about like a Hulu Alien series, and you heard about a writer who was mainly good quality, they knew their own stuff, but they haven't necessarily been involved in anything with Alien or Predator, or we heard about it's Alan Dean Foster who's writing it. Now, if you heard Alan Dean Foster's involved, you're going to have a lot more trust in whoever's giving him the control on that, because Alan Dean Foster, the novels he wrote, they just brought you into that. He's kind of bathed within the Alien verse, as it were, for literally since the beginning. But I think that a lot of this skepticism with Disney having Alien and Predator, a lot of people think they don't know how to handle that. Now, I would disagree with that, but you do have that kind of, pre-existing worry that they're going to hire people to deal with it who are not the right choice. And I think once we hear, like you said, that you have the right kind of talent, the correct writers, where you mentioned the guy's name earlier, you said if you heard that, the comics industry would be alight. Alien and Predator, it's that guy, it needs to be him. We need something like that. And before that happens, I think we're going to keep on getting this skepticism, no matter what Disney do. They could make one single continuity, or they could do individual little things to test it out, test the waters. But until we hear someone who the fandom trusts, there's just going to be this cynicism about it no matter what happens, I think.
Among some fans. But like you said, Paul, I do feel like now that it's with Marvel, just from that fact alone, you're going to see a lot of new people entering the fandom. Yes. But Aaron, you were about to say they had tried this before. In terms of like the...
Yeah.
Did you lose your train of thought there?
Sorry.
Everybody's been all over the fucking place with this one, so I've lost a lot of train of thoughts.
It's a big thing, because I think what Marvel's bringing right now with what the fact that they're bringing these characters to the Marvel universe in a sense to where Marvel will be producing these stories, and like how Eric said, Disney's been so quiet on what they're doing with the properties in general. We just, it's like what we don't know what to expect. And this is literally the first thing they've put out, I'm assuming, besides like if you count Hunting Grounds as that, I don't know, but the first actual creative thing that they're doing with these properties. And so, and again, I think it's a gear up. I think they're definitely going up to gearing up to do something. I just think they need to have someone, or they need to announce something of what kind of continuity or what kind of connection are they going to have? Because let's be real here. The Aliens and Predator, their own series aside, they're going to be bringing them together as AVP, right? Aliens versus Predator. So they're going to have some kind of continuity with that of them, those two things themselves in their own Marvel universe. Yeah,
well, at least all three comic properties at least seem to have a single editor. Anyway, so at least on that level, there should be some cohesion. But I mean, we're all asking for, a story group to come together for this and that, and we'd all love it. I'm sure for every single fucking property that we are fans of, we'd love, a guiding light up there, and we had that kind of, but there was the disconnect because you try being that bloke telling Ridley Scott he can't fucking do
no, sure, no. Wants. But here's the difference, though. The difference is that I think now that Disney owns 20th Century, I don't think Ridley Scott has that power anymore. Because
his essentially, they are the co-partners of the Alien series at the minute is how it stands. Scott Free it's like Brandywine with the first 3 films. I think that is where the relationship is with them at the minute. That's just from my understanding of talking to people.
Because I don't know how the production, if they own a stake in the character, and so there is something I don't know about that. But I think because of Disney's power, I don't know if Ridley, in my opinion, I don't think Ridley with the sale has as much say. He still has a say, maybe. I don't know. This is where my knowledge is not as good, obviously. But I'm assuming because of the power that Disney has, that they can just do what they want. So they don't need Ridley Scott. I think that's what I'm trying to say. 20th Century Fox maybe needed Ridley Scott more than Disney does. Because Disney because they're the ones that can say, we'll put a couple $100 million into Alien
from a financial point of view,
and that's
I think the problem is a lot of us don't tend to realize the legalities and the contractual stuff behind stuff like this. I mean, we can be saying, wouldn't it be lovely if, or I don't understand why such and such, but there's stuff going on that we don't know about. I mean, I bet the average person out there doesn't know that, the people that were shepherding it are gone. As far as I know, there is nobody there looking after the franchise at the minute on that level. Now, whether this announcement means there's been some change in that, but from what I understand, this has been 9 months or something in the making.
So a question for you, because you have the knowledge, and I really want to know, because as far as ownership of the characters, because Brandywine, because again, Geiler and the other guy, I forgot his name.
Carol.
Yeah, they offered that script, right, to make that Alien 5. I listened to your guys' podcast about it. And what's interesting is those guys are the ones that pretty much created the movie, right? So where's their stake, and how much control do they have creatively, and how much control
now?
It was all scot-free in recent times, but again, who knows if that's going to change with what Studios is doing. Yeah.
Well, I guess my question is Scott Free own, do they always own from now on anything Alien related, or is it only this is where I'm confused about?
No, they were just brought in to kind of
co-finance
but even they didn't have much of a hand in any of the expanded universe stuff.
But they ended up,
they did veto some stuff. Yeah, but they still weren't very involved in the comics or
right. But and that's what Aaron had a good point, was before it's different because you had a Ridley Scott, and he's gonna trump everything because he's Ridley Scott. He's a legend. I mean, whatever. And I think it's a great point to bring up, because now you don't really have, Disney can say, hey Ridley, we don't need you. See ya. They could say that, and they could do something completely different and have those people and put those people into place. And that's the thing. I don't know if they will or not.
But again, they inherited a company, so they inherit that company's contracts and licenses and responsibilities. And there's just so much that we don't necessarily truly understand about how it works.
Until the contracts expire, like with Dark Horse, so... All those contracts have an expiration date.
I don't think Disney are going to have any obligation with Ridley Scott unless they hire him.
I don't think Scott Free has any ownership stake over.
I don't know. Yeah, like
Predator. As of right now, I mean, they might have had while Prometheus or while Covenant was being filmed. As of right now, I think it's just a Disney thing.
Yep,
it's for Disney's to win or lose with. They can choose who to hire. They have not done any new contracts as far as we know.
And I think the comics might be a way of, like you were saying, Paul, of focus testing, because a lot of fans were unhappy with Covenant. It did do a bit of a nosedive in the box office after its initial release. So you've had Scott express interest in doing a third prequel film. Before, he wanted to do a whole bunch of them, but I don't think he would get more than 3 at this point, given the performance of Covenant. So I think Disney's like, okay, well, what do fans want? Do they want another prequel film? Do they want something that was more akin to Alien 5? Or do they want something entirely new and different? So I feel like they're finding their footing in this franchise, and they're probably going to use Marvel to do that.
Yeah, I think
which is fine. I mean, if they're putting out stuff like Labyrinth as a litmus test, I ain't gonna fucking complain at that.
I need to read that. Is that the one with Killian Plunkett, the artist?
Yes.
I love Killian Plunkett, by the way. He's phenomenal.
What do you mean if they're putting out stuff like? Oh, if they're doing it to the level of Labyrinth, you mean?
Yeah.
I need to read that.
One of the craziest.
I've heard it's crazy.
It's not crazy. It's intense.
They've got aliens trying to have the main character have sex with his mother.
No.
And then it jumps.
You've got to think of it as aliens trying to farm hosts. That level of intelligence.
Just think of it that way. That makes it
brilliant. They don't
guys
know
are blowing my mind
right
now.
now.
I need to download this immediately. I have it. So I'm
and
downloading
the
it right
thing
now.
is that the mother has like her limbs have been chopped off.
It's a fucked up comic. It is a fucked up comic.
It's fucking brilliant. I love
it's one of the ones you either love or you go, okay, not for me.
Or you're wrong.
It is a little weird. Yeah.
But I think for me, and this is where again, we don't know, and I just think with these IPs that are again mainstream IPs like Alien and Predator, they usually are owned by different companies, right? And that's why it's interesting. I think if you look at history right now, at least from the film side, not if you just take away the comics and the books, just the film side. Look at all these. They have someone overseeing as a producer, like the guy I mentioned from DCEU or DC Films, excuse me, from Warner Brothers, the James Wan's producer partner, Kevin Suzahara, is that his name? I forgot his name. Whatever. You have him. You have Kevin Feige. You've got Kathleen Kennedy and her group. Whatever. Or whoever takes over Star Wars. Or Lucasfilm will be now overseeing Star Wars creatively and helping spearhead that. So you have people in these places in different companies. They don't have a separate company, unfortunately, that can do that at this point, besides just 20th Century Studios. So that's my point, is like there needs to be someone, at least from the film side, that can say, this is where we're going with this. Because if you operate independently and let these everyone have free reign, you're going to get this kind of a mess. And I think that's what we've gotten from these films. They've been kind of a mess. I mean, The Predator was a mess. I mean, I watched that for the first time out of fear. I didn't watch it for years or whatever because of fear, because everyone told me it was crap. Yeah. And I finally watched it.
At the same time, I feel one of the interesting aspects about the Alien and Predator films is each one, with the exception of the prequels of Alien, has a different director and has a very different tone and a very different feel. I think, and I know you'll probably disagree with me on this, Paul, but as far as the Marvel movies go, they've made like, how many? Like 20 something, right?
22? Yeah.
Yeah. So each one feels very similar in tone, in my opinion. And maybe I'm unfair in saying this, but it feels like each one is a direct continuation of the other. They all reference each other. And Alien has before, well, even with the prequels, Prometheus is a very different identity than Covenant. Each film has, and I don't know, maybe Disney will never do another Alien or Predator film again. I think they might.
They will.
But with the comics, I think that will allow them to explore different story avenues that they could eventually take the films in. But I do worry that I feel like Marvel movies work much better with that sort of sequel format than Alien and Predator movies would. If they did make another Alien and Predator movie, they wouldn't want to pump it out like a franchise. It would be like, let's plan this out. We'll do one movie.
Yeah.
And then we'll build upon it with the expanded universe for a while, and then we'll do another film. But I do hope they keep it in a sense that each film is new and unique and has its own identity, not contradicting the other parts of the franchise, but at the same time not feeling like just a direct sequel continuation like you would see in the MCU.
No, for the record, I want to make this very clear. It's not lost on me that the MCU has a formula. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we all would agree that the MCU and AVP are vastly different franchises, right? Yeah. Of course. Now, what I'm trying to say is that there's a formula that Kevin Feige has that's generated at the mainstream audience. And I don't think every Marvel film's the same, but I definitely will agree that there are certain tones and ideas and formulas within the traditional script writing of the high action happens in the last act and all that stuff. Like, with the exception of Infinity War and Endgame, which I think are some of the better films, obviously, and Winter Soldier, they take that traditional aspect and a little more different. But obviously, after 22 films, there's a lot of similarities, and they're all very tonally the same. And you're right, Adam, absolutely. I'm never going to argue that. I still like it because I love those characters. I'm there for the characters, not necessarily like the storylines necessarily. Does that make sense? I'm more invested in the characters. Now, with AVP, I don't think you can do that, and I wouldn't do that. I am exactly like what you said, but you want to at least have it be some kind of cohesive universe. And I think
I can agree to that, but I hope that they offer opportunities like we've seen with the unused screenplay from Dark Horse, because they've gone back and they've mined some of these unused stories that that were at one time maybe going to happen, never did, and now we can see what they might have been, and that's been so interesting. And Dark Horse used to do that with Star Wars as well. They did 3 comics of like, what if A New Hope and Empire and Return of the Jedi went totally differently? I can't remember exactly what those were called, but they were
Star Wars and Infinites.
Yeah, they were great comics. And so I would love to allow for room for those kinds of things to continue. You could still have a main continuity that kind of fits together pretty well, but I hope it's not to the exclusion of occasionally doing original self-contained stories that might not be part of that continuity.
There's a possible problem with doing more of those alternative scripts, I've just realized, because how that would have worked was that Fox owned those scripts legally, and I don't know what's happened in terms of the legal side. What's happened to
Disney owns Fox. They own everything Fox.
Okay.
Regardless of the scripts are owned by Fox,
if they weren't filmed.
Yes. But Adam, Marvel is no stranger to alternate things. I mean, their whole fucking multiverse is based on alternate continuities.
Yeah. What if stories?
They've done what ifs, which is random.
Are they doing some Marvel TV shows?
Yeah, they're doing a what if TV show.
Yeah, they're actually
which one is
mainstream now.
What's the what if TV show?
I couldn't tell you any specific storylines, but it's basically the idea of what if such and such happened.
What
self-contained episode?
What property is it?
It's everybody. Everyone's involved.
Everyone in the MCU.
Yeah. It's like an alternate Avengers show.
Yeah, it's like every story is different. Like so every episode will be a different what if story. So like the first one, I think one will deal with what if Captain America or Peggy Carter was Captain America, or what if Iron Man was, or one. I think one episode's going to be what if T'Challa was actually the one that Yondu picked up and he was Star-Lord. And it's those kinds of things, and that came directly from the comic books. I mean, I love those.
Was that recently announced, that show?
Yeah, it was announced last summer.
Oh,
it's animated. It's animated.
Oh, it's animated. Okay.
Yeah,
and that's another thing I've noticed too, is you see that a lot with DC films as well. Like you have the animated DC films, and a lot of them are pretty fucking adult as well. I don't know what the animated Marvel side of things is like these days in terms of their films, but it's been interesting that DC's been doing that. And it's separate from the films. Like you have the DCEU films, and then they make a movie like Joker. Now they're making Robert Pattinson's Batman. That's not part of the DCEU. And it seems like DC's a little more open to that than maybe Marvel would be. But now that you're telling me this show idea, maybe I'm wrong on that. So
it's again, I think it's awareness of what they actually do.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, but with Marvel, it's a deliberate what if this happened. With DC, it's more like, oh, well, that film didn't perform well, we'll change that character or whatever. It's not a deliberate thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is a huge thing, and fans, including us, are going to have complex feelings about it. And like you said, Aaron, I feel like there's going to be a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to a lot of the people that have loved Dark Horse, and I certainly have. I've loved a lot of the stories that Dark Horse has produced, and it's been part of the expanded universe identity, like one of the core elements of it. So this is going to be a big shift, but I do hope that fans have an open mind with this. Like, this could be really good for the franchises. This could really boost their profile.
I think so, yeah.
So I'm of... again, it's bittersweet. It'll be sad to see Dark Horse go. At the same time, it is exciting to see what Marvel could do with these properties, and I think they could do some real good with them.
And because of just how quiet it has been, the fact that it's being given to the big boy, it's being given to Marvel, it's reassuring knowing that the properties aren't going to flounder under the new ownership. We are at that point where we're not quite sure how everything's going to work, which is the scary point. Yeah. That's why you do have these knee-jerk reactions, as well as not necessarily knowing what they put out. It is a period of uncertainty, and this is all speculation and wheel spinning and all that kind of stuff, and we've gone completely all over the place as to what I originally thought we were really going to be doing. But I mean, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what happens. I'm not a massive comic book fan, but I do have my monthly pulls. I get Spider-Man, I get Spider-Gwen every month. I get all the Spider crossovers. I get the Flash trades. So it's for me. It's not just losing. I'm not just losing Alien. I do have all these other stuff as well, and I'm interested to see how they are handled under the new ownership. And they are people that I enjoy.
It's going to be an exciting experience when the Marvel Alien 1 comes out, and just like, oh my god, here we go. So and with the image teasers, I really hope that they establish the property before they do any crossovers.
Oh god, yes.
So I don't think they're going to do crossovers right away for a long time.
Would be I mean, the teaser images kind of hinted at that, but I think it eventually will happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't have even allowed the teaser.
Yeah,
and
it's got to.
The post specifically sasays wrecking havoc in the Marvel universe. So it's like, what does that mean?
No, that's sensationalism. Yeah, Marvel. You go back and just read the fucking Marvel press release. Don't read everybody else's bullshit.
I think that was a quote from the editor, right? Or the artist.
No, the artist is something different though. David Finch is a work for hire.
Yeah, Finch said that.
Yeah, Finch is.
I'm pretty sure it was on the official Marvel site.
It's come from the artist, not from Jake Thomas or Sapolsky or anything.
Yeah, I think it's more like Aaron said, sensationalizing the ideas behind that more than anything. So. I don't think we're going to see it for a long time. Obviously, we're going to have something like that, but to be honest, I don't think it's going to be in a continuity.
I mean, Finch is the one who drew the crossover thing, so maybe that's just him hoping that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a fucking Marvel artist and you're told, look, it's some Alien and Predator, you're going to cross it over.
Yeah, eventually. I mean, look at Batman and Predator.
I'm surprised they didn't have the alien with Spider-Man's webbing or something. You're gonna.
Well, I mean, it's taking it.
Yeah, even when they do a crossover, I really hope it doesn't become like a freak of the week type thing. Like I hope they have respect for these characters.
I think they do.
The crossovers in general have always been respectful. I mean, even the fucking Archie versus Predator. That was a lot better than it had any right to sound. Well, any right than it sounds like it should be.
Right. No, that's cool. All right. I have
I liked the Vampirella one. You didn't.
I didn't like that. Yeah,
I say that as someone who doesn't know anything about Vampirella.
I didn't know anything about Vampirella.
We still have to do a podcast of the top crossovers, Aaron.
We'll do a crossovers one.
The Witchblade and Darkness crossover.
I haven't read that one.
You got to read that one.
Have you guys done any podcast on the Batman and Predator one?
Not yet.
I don't think we have.
Well, guys, please I would love to come back and talk about it because I bought the other ones digitally too, so I would love to have a reason to read those and go on because I love.
We've been thinking of doing a wider all crossovers podcast where we would hopefully have enough time to go through all of them, and I think we could.
To be fair, I think we would have to do
a separate,
narrow down ones, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, the idea of Marvel crossover stuff, I do agree with Adam. The universe, Alien and Predator under Marvel needs to be established as its own thing. But down the line, I would love to see them cross over. I mean, fucking Predator going up against Wolverine, Predator going up against Kraven, even though Kraven's really not that good. Alien going up against Venom, shit like that. I mean, there's plenty of characters that I think would be really interesting to see them cross over, and them sharing the same house would make them, reasonably reasonably big crossover events and give them to me. Just give them to me a couple of years down the line.
Agreed. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, people have to remember there was already a Buffy the Vampire Slayer pseudo alien crossover in one of the comics of Buffy. They didn't call it the Alien, but it was literally exactly the same. It had acid for blood, everything. And it was basically an in-joke based on Joss Whedon having written Alien Resurrection.
Alien has been in something Marvel, I'm sure of it, actually. Let me just find it now.
Really? I don't think it's ever had a crossover with Marvel.
Let me find it, because I'm sure I posted about it.
It's because you even had Predator versus Tarzan. It was getting to the stage where if you can think of a property, Alien or Predator had probably been in it somewhere.
Well, it was in the same sort of situation as the Buffy one. Oh, no, it's not Marvel. Sorry, I'm thinking of a Galaxy Quest comic that came out.
Yeah.
That's IDW.
Yeah, they've done DC crossovers, Top Cow crossovers, and what's the Rebellion line called that does Judge Dredd?
AD.
That's right.
AD 2000.
2000 AD.
Oh yeah, but I said this on Twitter, but anyone who wants to buy physical copies of those DC crossovers, I do it now because they ain't going to be reprinted anytime soon. So
they're up there. They're up there. The same.
Right. Marvel will be reprinting those.
Yeah, I was going to say, audience people, get it now while it's hot because those aren't going to be reprinted maybe ever. So
and also talking about like the Marvel's potential for horror as well as like what if type stuff. We should really mention right here and now, there was a whole series that Marvel did of, it was like a what if multiverse thing of where all the Marvel characters, including the Incredible Hulk, could become zombies. And that was really quite full-on horror in that.
Yeah, and that was Robert Kirkman who wrote a lot of those issues.
There was some of the characters like Peter Parker put a slightly humorous spin on it, but it was quite, there was gore, there was proper stuff going on in that.
No, I mean, there's not
even mainline Spider-Man. Well, I say mainline event Spider-Man's done some fucking horrific shit, like the tie-ins to Spider-Verse, where one of the Peters was a fucking horrific spider that ate somebody.
I remember that in the cartoon. Yeah.
Oh, I love the original Spider-Verse comics.
Oh god, so there was so much fun.
I'm assuming it is from some of the promotional materials, but I've never actually read it. That Morbius the Vampire. I'm assuming that's
there's a horror theme. Oh yeah, totally. No, Marvel is not. Listen, Marvel is not. It's not Dark Horse to where it's going to be, again, saying 4-letter words and maybe having might tone down its violence a little bit. And again, I don't even know if it's going to be that much. I mean, I haven't read Labyrinth though, so it sounds pretty. I don't know if they'd be doing Labyrinth anytime soon. But that being said, it's not going to be. Again, there's a lot of stuff out there that's very, very violent, bloody, and not sacrificing this, censoring things or. It's not all 80s. It's not all 80s Spider-Man where it's him, or whatever. It is floating around going, oh, golly gee, guys, blah, blah, blah. You don't have the comics code over these people. And again, that's a big reason, another reason why for years Marvel didn't produce a lot of violent stuff because they were under the comics code. And
it's like with Batman, the old 1960s Batman. Yes. Compare that to how it was modernized.
Yeah.
Complete 180.
I think the Alien and Predator comics are going to be just fine tonally wise. Creative wise, that's where I think it's really going to be interesting to me. That's what I wrestle my hands together about. I'm like, oh man, what are they going to give us? Because I think, like you said, Aaron, or maybe it was you, Adam, that kind of said it's going to be really exciting to get the first issue, and you better believe there's going to be some hype around these comics when they come out, like. Regardless of the creative teams. And now imagine if they put on a pretty decent, pretty famous creative team or a hyped creative team. Just that with the idea of their first issue is going to be huge. This is not the same thing, but the first Marvel comic for Star Wars when it came back sold like millions of copies. I mean, granted, they had like, all variant cover central, but that's what they're going to do with these franchises too. They're going to put a bunch of variants on it. People are going to be excited about it, and then
they need to kickstart it.
Yeah. Exactly, and you're going to get people to read it, and they're going to go, "Oh, this is really cool," or "Yeah, I'm going to read this not because it's Alien, because it's Jonathan Hickman, and in fact it's Alien or whatever." Again, I only put Hickman out there because he's a big name in comics. There's other big names in comics,
and also people have got to realize this isn't just for the fans. This is going to be for the shareholders. They're going to want to get maximum coverage, but they want to put the Marvel brand on it because that is going to be their chance to say, look what we can do with it. It's like when they did Farscape. The people, what would you think if you heard like Jim Henson was going to do a science fiction show? Henson Workshop wanted to do that because they wanted to prove they could do horror and they could do this, that, and that. But you would never associate with the people who did the Muppets. But you look at what Farscape became. And they had some really, like they had John Crichton with his eyeball coming out like that in when he was being tortured. It was really full on stuff.
Damn. Yeah. I for one, I think that those first issues they come out it's gonna be really exciting. And I think
I hope they at least do an Alien comic, a Predator comic, and an AVP comic next year. We have a run of each, and hopefully more.
They said it'd be next year that we'd see the new series as.
Okay. I mean, typically, I'm sure Marvel. I mean, we're not going to get as many Alien and Predator and AVP comics as we will Spider-Man, and they're bigger properties, obviously. But I am wondering if it'll be to the same extent of Dark Horse. Like, how many runs did Dark Horse typically have in a year? Like, 5 or 6?
They took a break, but they took a 10-year break at one point, though, right? Like, that's what I was reading about. When I was doing my
between Xenogenesis and.
Yeah, after the three.
Yeah, it was
after the 3 World War.
It was before the 3 World War. There was a big ass break there.
And even after the 3 World War arc, there was a little bit of a break, wasn't there?
Probably about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, until after Prometheus.
Yeah, they only put out those little novellas, Inhuman Condition and Fast Track to Heaven. I think they were the only few things that came out before the big reboot.
So, I mean, to me, I think that's what. I don't think you're going to have breaks like that unless they really aren't selling. And I think that Marvel's going to be, I think you're going to see a monthly, in one form or another, a monthly Predator and monthly Alien, and probably at some point, some like event Alien versus Predator comic. And I think this is where it's going to be fun. I think there's going to be more, and again, maybe I'm wrong, but there's probably going to be build up between the two comics to get to an AVP. To be honest, to bring films back into it, that's kind of what I think the film should do. I mean,
it would be nice. It would be super nice.
I know that's kind of, some people are going to be hardcore Alien fans who do not want their Predator.
Yeah, I've always loved AVP, but there's a lot of fans that feel like it should just always be separate. But that's the problem. Execution. That's the problem with the films too. Like the Alien prequels, they created the Alien franchise as its own separate continuity in the films compared to AVP, because the continuities with the Weyland Corporation and the founder don't fit. So,
but it always felt like Fox was like, "We're going to do this." No. Oh, we're going to do no. They're always a little too scared.
It's very reactionary and backpedaling and course correction and stuff like that. Yeah.
And again, just like the comics and anyone going forward, you have to have a clear someone in charge that's going to be pushing the narratives at least a little bit, controlling where the stories are going. Not exactly verbatim per, you need to have this, and this, but just, this is where we need to go, and we need to get it to this point, whatever, and get it to that somehow. And so, and they're going to have that with editors. And that's the nice thing about comics, right? You have editors who are now, hopefully in control a little bit of where they're going. And again, I don't want to sacrifice the independent storytelling kind of aspects that I think Alien has always had a little more creative freedom than I think the Predator. Predator's a straight up just action film. That's an action franchise.
It's got some horror elements as well.
Yeah, exactly. But whereas Alien has a lot more, a little more going on with it. And I think I can understand where people are a little more protective of that, because Predators, I love. By the way, I love Predator. Predators is my favorite of the Predators besides after the first one. Predators is amazing. It's my favorite, and I think that there's so much to build from that. You need to focus on those aspects of what can we do to create this continuity in the comics, outside the comics, whatever, but keep it, keep the fans happy. But yet, here's the important part: bring in the new ones, because without new fans coming in, you're not going to eventually get new stuff, because the old fans like us will eventually have, there'll be a few of us left. But if you're not replenishing, these things,
your sales space goes.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to die off eventually. So you need to eventually grow it. And how you grow Alien, I don't know. And it's not by prequels by Ridley Scott. I can tell you that right now. And again, I like the prequels, but it's time to push the franchises forward.
I agree.
It's even if you like them, the financial reality is that they're just not selling.
I mean, Prometheus did. It was just Covenant that had the big drop off. But I think part of Prometheus was beyond just Alien. It was Ridley Scott's return to sci-fi.
Well, it wasn't just Ridley Scott. It was people heard it was Ridley Scott and H.R. Giger coming back together. But ultimately, Giger unfortunately didn't contribute much, and then he passed away. And part of that was due to, a bit like the Marvel situation you said earlier, it was due to Ridley Scott's cinematographer, wasn't it? He wanted greater control over what Giger did, and Giger wasn't willing, and Ridley Scott had to sort of choose between them, I think. But yeah, I think a big part of it was Giger and Scott coming together, and people. But the novelty of that has now sort of worn off now.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to be able to sell it just on Ridley Scott's name alone.
Not anymore, especially with how polarizing the prequels have become anyway.
I mean, there's marketing traction there. It's just it doesn't have the power that it did with
it once did. Yeah.
And speaking of Prometheus, I would love to have the Prometheus. And again, I hope they say the films are canon. These films are canon. Maybe they unfortunately take the AVP films out because you have to, because they don't line up. But in those comics, take those Prometheus aspects and integrate it with the Predator, like how they did.
They did that. Dark Horse did a massive run of two big series, which is Fire and Stone and Life and Death. And I honestly don't feel that AVP works in the Prometheus context myself.
But now we have. Here's the good news. With that, Marvel can look at the pros and the cons of doing that with those comics and say, how do we improve that? How do we make that more connective? And because again, if you're gonna bring the franchises with Alien versus Predator, I mean, that means it inherently has to bring in the Prometheus stuff, doesn't it? So I mean, that's now, if you count that as continuity.
I mean, then it would have to discount the AVP films, but
they do.
Again,
anyway.
you can't
exactly.
You can't have the idea that the alien came from David and then the Predators have also been hunting them for a long time. So even with Predator 2, like that violates the canon of that. So
So you take out the Alien versus Predator films, and if Marvel's going based off of just the Aliens franchise and Predator franchise with those things apart, it will be interesting how they build it. Again, whether they're building off a new continuity or whatever is, which I think we all can agree they probably are. It's going to be probably a complete fresh reboot. So this thing will have to incorporate these Prometheus engineers.
I don't think it has to. A lot of the newer comics by Dark Horse have not incorporated anything to the prequels, and I hope it stays that way. I do think the prequels have been so divisive and polarizing that Marvel would be better served focusing on the Alien universe, not including those elements of the prequel films, because it'll just be too divisive among fans, in my opinion.
But here's the problem, though, because what does AVP do? They push the aliens in during the modern day.
Yeah, you wouldn't touch on those aspects. You wouldn't touch on Peter Weyland. You wouldn't touch on.
You would have to go in the future because
that's where it always belonged anyway. I mean, that's where it started.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically from a corporate standpoint, you're in a sort of honeymoon period where they got a blank slate. But the problem is you only get one shot at doing the blank slate thing. It's for them to decide what they want to incorporate from Fox. But if they do it wrong, that's the sticking point, because it's going to haunt them forever. Are they going to go with the Prometheus stuff? Are they going to go with this, that? It's for them to choose. We can't make any predictions. We're not them. But if they choose to, they do have because they are the new owners, they can choose to say, we declare this as not any longer part of canon. They can choose to do that. Whether or not they will, we don't know.
I don't see them doing anything with Prometheus like Fire and Stone and Life and Death did. I feel like they are going to go with what's universally popular with fans.
They'll stick to Alien, Aliens, and Predator.
Exactly. Yep.
You think so?
That's what they should.
Yeah, that is the Disney mentality, isn't it? You know, those are the proven. The proven successes, and
let's be honest, Michael Fassbender isn't getting any younger. They will get to the point where he's not going to be able to.
Hey, the digital de-aging stuff. I mean, look at Samuel L. Jackson and Captain America. So,
hey, you know,
Captain Marvel. Sorry.
What if they do incorporate the Prometheus stuff in the comics? What I would love for them to do is do let's say how they take care of David. After Covenant is a Predator like kills him or something like that. Like that would be to me like that again.
Oh, Ridley Scott would love that.
As long as he's not in that derelict ship chair.
Yeah.
Ridley Scott is not a favor of the.
Like, you want to bring in the Prometheus stuff in the Marvel, the new Marvel continuity of Aliens versus Predator, but you know what I'm saying. But like that whole new thing, it's cool to have. To start off with the Predator coming in, just wiping out David right there.
Prometheus, I mean. Even though Prometheus was kind of incorporated into the Alien films, Aaron and I were kind of talking about this. Prometheus is its own property. It's its own separate franchise that was not mentioned in the Marvel thing. So I don't know, like the thing, if they were going to touch on the prequels and do a comic, they should keep it contained to that. I would like to see the story of David and Shaw on that Planet 4 and how that unfolded.
I would love to see that.
If they did that comic, that would be fucking amazing. But keep that contained to the prequels. Like, this is part of the story that we told in these films, and we're expanding upon that, but it's not part of this big wider thing. That's what I mean, that they need to kind of pick and choose what they need to have groups of stories, I feel like, and not have any direct contradictions, but the stories have their own unique identities and they're allowed to do their own things and they don't have to always reference each other. So if fans like me don't like a story, like with the prequels are very divisive, I can just say, you know what, I'm not including that in my headcanon and not have it always be referenced in everything. So it's easier for some fans that might be jaded to compartmentalize stuff like that. At the same time, I think you can do it in a way that's not that's not everything out of sync, you know. So
I think we're starting to go around in circles here.
Yeah.
So perhaps this is wrap up time. It's been nearly 2.5 hours. Is there anything different that anybody'd like to? No.
It's just exciting. I mean, it's exciting and
scary.
Scary. That's as simple as we can put it from everything we've talked about.
Yeah, we're apprehensive. It's the eternal thing about prepare for the worst but hope for the best. I think there's the potential there for it to be.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, we've gone through all the positives that Marvel could introduce to this. We've gone through the worries. We've gone through things that alleviate any of the worries based on existing examples.
We've gone through the likelihoods based on their track record.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Okay, I think we've covered everything without looping around and going over stuff again, as we all want to do sometimes when it comes to the speculative episodes, because at the end of the day, this is a speculative podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's been the first we've done for a goddamn while as well.
Yeah,
at least.
Like when we had the first teaser trailer for Covenant, we talked for 2.5 hours about it. So
3 hours. 3 hours. So yeah. Anyway, everybody listening, everybody watching, please feel free to chip in with comments, concerns. Is some of the stuff we've talked about, some of the examples of Marvel doing adult or more mature things alleviated your concerns, or are you still narrowly focused with your laser vision? But yeah, I mean, we're certainly looking forward to seeing what they are going to do. But until then, Paul.
Yes.
Bit of a podcast whore, aren't you? So do you want
I am a podcast whore.
Do you want to let everybody know some of the multitude of podcasts that they can find you on?
You know what? I'm just going to say, go find me on Twitter at Herman22 with 2 N's. That's my podcast, or that's where all my podcasts are listed at. I got a bunch of them. Gone long. I just want to say thank you again. I know I talk a lot, and This has been a blast, guys. Seriously, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate it. I love the show. I'll come back anytime you ask me to come on. This is a blast, and again, it's great meeting you guys all, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, and for sharing your Marvel expertise.
We'll definitely have you back when Comic One drops.
I'll be there.
Adam, where can people find us?
If you want to find us, we have a website, avpgalaxy.net. We're also on all the major social channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can find those by typically just searching AVP Galaxy or Alien versus Predator Galaxy.
Versus as in VS or VS dot.
Yeah.
And where are you on
if you want to follow me personally, it's RidgeTop21 at both Twitter and Instagram.
And if you want to follow me, I'm only available on Twitter for stalking because, I have my limitations on how much I can handle. And that is _Corporal Hicks. And that's Alien, Predator, Stargate, Star Trek, Airsoft, general nerdy bollocks like that. Eric, I'm assuming you still haven't sorted yourself out.
Yeah, I'm trying. Well, at the moment, I'm still on DeviantArt at Centinalysis, but I'm trying to move over to ArtStation on a less pretentious sounding name. So I will update.
Maybe one people can spell.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. That would be very useful for actually getting a profile out there.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for listening. This has been Corporal Hicks,
RidgeTop,
Xenomorphine,
and P-Thug
signing off.